Chapter 1796. The God's Graveyard. What was that place? It was the #1 forbidden area in the entire ancient God galaxy. Even extraordinary powers like the great spiritual God Palace and the Battle Pavilion were extremely fearful of that place. But Yi Xian had actually said that he couldn't take a single attack from him. A single attack? Is he that arrogant? The palace master of the great spiritual God Palace, Jianghu, stared fixedly at Yi Xian. He isn't even afraid of the God's Graveyard. She spoke solemnly. I never expected that the minor spiritual God Palace would actually invite the help of a genius from the God's Graveyard. No wonder Wang Zhan wasn't a match for him. What surprised me even more was that Situ was actually killed by a single attack from Yi Xian. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian, who was not far away, with fear in his eyes. How strong is this guy? Jianghu fell silent as well. How strong is Yi Xian? Suddenly, the white-haired old man spoke ferociously. Yi Xian, how dare you kill a genius from the God's Graveyard? You! Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the green profound sword directly sank into the white-haired old man's forehead, instantly absorbing his soul completely. However, that wasn't the end of it. Yi Xian turned around to look at the experts from the minor spiritual God Palace. With a command in his heart, besides the 2 remaining great saints, the heads of all the experts from the minor spiritual God Palace flew into the air. Instant kill. At this moment, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically. Killing a saint was like killing a chicken. It was too terrifying. Even the eyes of Jianghu and the other senior great saints were filled with fear. Even they were extremely afraid of the speed of Yi Xian's flying sword. Yi Xian gazed at the 2 remaining great saints from the minor spiritual God Palace. He was just about to attack when the 2 great saints vanished. They've fled. Yi Xian was stunned. They fled just like that? Yi Xian fell silent as he watched the 2 great saints vanish into the sky. It wasn't that he didn't want to give chase, but he couldn't catch up at all unless he used the green profound sword. His flying sword could only reach that terrifying speed within a certain range. If it exceeded that range, his flying sword would not be able to reach that terrifying speed. What a pity. Yi Xian shook his head and sheathed his green profound sword. The souls of the 2 great sages were a great supplement for the Qingxian sword. His green profound sword was a growth-type sword. If it could devour the souls of those great sages, it would have a great chance of reaching the next level. If the Qingxian sword broke through again, Yi Xian didn't even dare to think about it. This sword itself was very abnormal. Right at this moment, Xiao Linlang, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly said in a low voice, "Brother Yi, you're being impulsive." Yi Xian looked at Xiao Linlang and asked, "Kill the small caves?" Xiao Linlang shook her head, "It's the Godslayer's cemetery." Yi Xian smiled. "Can you tell me more about the graveyard of the gods?" After a moment of silence, Xiao Linlang said, "It's an extremely terrifying place. It's even more terrifying than the ruins of Sword Sect. We still dared to go to the ruins of Sword Sect, but we don't even dare to go to the graveyard of the gods." Yi Xian asked softly, "Is it that mysterious?" Xiao Linlang nodded. "It's mysterious and powerful." With that, she looked at Yi Xian with a complicated look in her eyes. "I was really being impulsive." Yi Xian said with a smile, "I want to kill you." It was difficult for me to retract my sword. Xiao Linlang said softly, "Brother Yi is much stronger than I imagined." Yi Xian laughed and said, "Miss Linlang, how much do you know about the graveyard of the gods?" Xiao Linlang shook her head. "I don't know much, but there's a place that I should know a lot about." Yi Xian asked, "What place?" Xiao Linlang said in a low voice, "Xiao Lu." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Xiao Lu?" Xiao Linlang nodded. "It's also a somewhat mysterious place." With that, she pointed with her finger, and a white light entered the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Xiao Linlang withdrew her finger and said, "This is the address to Xiao Lu. However, young Master Yi should be mentally prepared. That place is very dark. If you want to obtain information, you'll have to pay a huge price. Yi Xian smiled. Understood. Xiao Linlang said, Brother Yi, I still have things to do, so I'll be taking my leave. With that, she turned around and disappeared into the horizon. At this moment, Zhu Xiao walked over with Wang Zhan. Zhu Xiao cupped his fists at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, thank you for today. These words of thanks were sincere and sincere. If it weren't for Yi Xian, Wang Zhan would have died. And that would be an unbearable loss for the battle pavilion. Nurturing a Wang Zhan was not an easy task. Yi Xian smiled. There's no need to thank me. Brother Wang and I are friends. Wang Zhan glanced at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. Yi Xian said, Brother Wang, today's setback isn't a bad thing. What do you think? Wang Zhan nodded. There's always someone better out there. Yi Xian laughed. It won't be long before Brother Wang Zhan's strength reaches new heights. A smile appeared on Zhu Zhao's face as well. Today's defeat wasn't a bad thing for Wang Zhan. Wang Zhan no longer had any arrogance in his heart. To Wang Zhan, today's setback was equivalent to a rebirth. Zhu Xiao suddenly said, Little friend Yi, we'll be taking our leave. Yi Xian nodded. Take care. Wang Zhan cupped his fists. Brother Yi, take care. With that, he, Zhu Xiao, and the rest of the battle pavilion experts disappeared. At this time, Li Shuran also said, Brother Yi, I'm going back too. Yi Xian looked at Li Shuran. With a tap of his finger, a spatial ring landed in front of Li Shuran. Li Shuran's expression changed drastically when he glanced at it. There were a total of 100,000 fortune divine crystals in the spatial ring. Li Shuran looked at Yi Xian in astonishment. Brother Yi, this is? Yi Xian smiled. The outer disciple's salary is small, keep it. Li Shuran shook his head. No. I can't take it. Yi Xian said with a smile, take it. This is not charity. I treat you as a friend. Do you understand what I mean? Li Shuran was silent. Yi Xian smiled. Don't be so wishy-washy. Take it quickly. Oh right. He took out another spatial ring and handed it to Li Shuran. This is my gift to Elder Gu Qing. Give it to him for me. After a moment of silence, Li Shuran said, Brother Yi, how good would it be if you were still in the outer disciples? Yi Xian laughed. Li Shuran did not say anything else. He kept the two spatial rings. Brother Yi, we'll meet again. After saying that, he disappeared into the horizon. Around them, the experts that came from other places also left. Yi Xian's name spread like a plague across the heavens. Instant kill of a great sage. The current Yi Xian could be said to be the #1 prodigy in the heavens. Small Grotto Heaven. Beside the lake, in front of the small Grotto Heaven Lord, a shadow was whispering something. After a long time, the old man said softly, Instant kill of a great sage? The shadow nodded. The speed of this person's flying sword is unprecedented. It's terrifying. The old man narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. When did he become so terrifying? The shadow shook his head. He wasn't this terrifying before. After he came out of the mausoleum of swords, his strength became so terrifying. The old man said in a low voice, he had a fortuitous encounter there. The shadow nodded. I think so. The old man fell silent for a long time. We can't let him live. The shadow nodded. He has already matured. If we allow him to continue growing, the consequences will be unimaginable. The old man suddenly said, What did the gods' graveyard say? The shadow shook his head. They haven't responded yet. The old man said, Yi Xian killed Situ. They won't let it go. Of course, we are responsible for this as well. He paused for a moment before he said, Ask second brother Li to go there. Ask him to bring a few more people. The shadow hesitated for a moment before he said, "This person already has the strength to instantly kill a great sage." The old man glanced at the shadow. "I don't believe that he can even kill second brother Li. Just ask them to be careful." The shadow nodded. "All right." After saying that, he turned and left. After the shadow left, the old man fell silent for a long time. After a long time, he suddenly stood up and walked towards the distance. It didn't take long for the old man to arrive at the peak of a mountain. There was a luxurious palace there, and there was only a single statue in the palace. A statue of a woman. This woman was the supreme law of the world. And this statue had been built by the ancestors of the small abode. The old man walked to the statue in the palace and bowed slightly to it with an extremely respectful expression. He would come here every once in a while to pay his respects. The supreme law of the universe. This was the faith of the small abode. After a long time, the old man bowed again. "Supreme, please bless my small abode for 10,000 years." After Yi Xian left the ancient star region with Dao Yi and Shaoan, he arrived at a lake according to the address Xiao Linlang had given him. There was a small pavilion by the lake. The pavilion was built by the lake. It wasn't large, but it was very exquisite. A small pavilion. When Yi Xian and the others arrived not far from the pavilion, a woman in a green dress came to greet them. The woman in the green dress bowed slightly to Yi Xian. "You must be young Master Yi." Yi Xian looked at the woman and smiled. "You knew I was coming." The woman nodded. "Master said young Master Yi would come." Yi Xian smiled. "Your master is very resourceful. Does your master know why I'm here?" The woman smiled. "Master said young Master Yi is here to inquire about God's graveyard." Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The woman shook her head. Yi Xian smiled. "What do you mean by shaking your head?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, master means that young Master Yi is too late." Yi Xian was puzzled. "What do you mean?" The woman said, "In the entire ancient God star sector and outside of it, there is no force that can compare to God's graveyard. In other words, young Master Yi, you will die for sure." Yi Xian blinked. "This is what your master said?" The woman nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian smiled. "I understand." Having said that, he looked at Dao Yi. "Let's go." Dao Yi nodded slightly. He took Shaoan and left with Yi Xian. After a few steps, the woman behind Yi Xian suddenly said, "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at the woman. The woman said, "Young Master Yi, you know nothing about God's graveyard. When you come into contact with them, all your confidence will vanish, and only fear will remain. Now, death is getting closer and closer to you. Can you feel it?" Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. You know nothing about the use of monthly tickets. Do you know what monthly tickets are for? Monthly tickets can be exchanged for bonuses. But in your hands, you can't exchange them. But I can. So, do you understand? Chapter 1797. Needless to say, Yi Xian was speechless at this moment. This woman is saying that I will definitely die. Without a word, Yi Xian left with Dao Yi and Shaoan. At this time, the woman said, "Young Master Yi, you." Yi Xian suddenly raised his middle finger. "Get lost." With that, he disappeared into the distance with Dao Yi and Shaoan. Behind him, the woman watched Yi Xian and the other two leave with a calm expression. On the other side, Dao Yi said, "This god's graveyard is not simple." Yi Xian smiled. "Let's not bother about them." Dao Yi nodded. "What's your plan now?" Yi Xian looked at the sky. "If I'm not wrong, the people from the small cave heaven are coming for me." Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. "This time, the people from the small cave heaven are coming for me." Yi Xian said, "I know." Dao Yi asked, can you handle it yourself? Yi Xian laughed. With the sword in my hand, I am invincible. Dao Yi patted Yi Xian's head. Have you forgotten how miserable you were in the past? Yi Xian was speechless. Dao Yi said, I know you are strong and you will not underestimate your enemy. But you still have to be careful, understand? Yi Xian nodded. I know. He would not underestimate his enemy. He had not reached the level of Qing, and his father, who could look down on everyone in the world. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian said, Are you going back to the great spiritual palace? Dao Yi nodded. There are many things I want to learn from them. As she said that, she glanced at and Yi Xian smiled and said, Let her follow me. Dao Yi nodded. She's not simple. I can't let her follow me. It's best if she follows you. Yi Xian nodded. He took out a storage ring and handed it to Dao Yi. For you. Dao Yi glanced at Yi Xian and accepted the gift. Yi Xian was a little speechless. Aren't you going to see what it is? Dao Yi replied, There's no need for that. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Then take care. If anyone bullies you in the great spiritual god palace, contact me. Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. And then? Yi Xian blinked his eyes. I will destroy the great spiritual god palace. Dao Yi shook his head and laughed. You're very arrogant now. With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, Don't let yourself be bullied. Dao Yi waved her hand lightly. I know. After saying that, she disappeared. Shaoan turned to look at Yi Xian. Brother Yi Xian, where are we going now? Yi Xian smiled. I have something to do. With that, he took out the Qingxian sword and was about to leave with Shaoan. At that moment, a terrifying aura suddenly swept down from the sky. It's here. Yi Xian turned to look at Shaoan and said with a smile, Let's go and play with Xiao Ta first. With that, he put Shaoan into Xiao Ta's body. At that moment, an old man appeared not far away from Yi Xian. The old man had his hands behind his back. He stood straight and his eyes were extremely sharp. Great sage. The old man was Old Li from the small grotto heaven. Behind Li Lao Er, there were 3 people. All of them were great sages. Old Li looked at Yi Xian. I heard that you can kill great sages in seconds. You. Just as he said this, his pupils suddenly shrank, and his right arm suddenly blocked in front of him. Bang! An expanse of sword light shattered as second brother Li retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer. As soon as he stopped moving, the layer of golden armor on his right arm shattered into pieces. Seeing that. If this chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. Old Li's expression became extremely serious. However, at that moment, another sword radiance slashed at him. It was so fast that it could not be seen by the naked eye. Old Li's expression changed drastically. He quickly raised his left arm to block. Bang! Another wave of sword light erupted, and Old Li's second brother was forced to retreat repeatedly. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly walked towards Li Lao Er. He did not make a move, but Li Lao Er retreated rapidly. Because one after another, the flying swords slashed at Old Li. The speed of the flying swords was too fast. They were so fast that Old Li could not dodge them and could only block them. At that moment, he could only block them with his physical body. No, he could only block them with the relic armor he was wearing. Just like that, Yi Xian walked toward Old Li slowly. With every step he took, Old Li retreated hundreds of feet away. At the side, the other 2 great sages were dumbfounded. Just as they were about to attack, 2 flying swords slashed at them and sent them flying. They did not even have the strength to fight back. Fast. Yi Xian's flying swords were not particularly powerful, but they were fast. After Yi Xian had taken 10 steps, the divine armor on Li Lao Er's body directly exploded, and almost in an instant, a sword directly stabbed into his chest. Defeated. He did not even have the time to attack. Old Li raised his head and looked at Yi Xian in the distance. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Yi Xian walked to Old Li's front and took out the green mysterious sword. He raised his hand and slashed. The green mysterious sword sank into Old Li's forehead. In an instant, Old Li's soul was absorbed. After absorbing Old Li's soul, the green mysterious sword trembled violently. Xiao Han said excitedly, "Young master, this sword is very nourishing." Yi Xian smiled. "Xiao Han, how long will it take for you to break through?" Xiao Han thought for a moment and said, "I need to devour at least 100 experts of this level before I can break through." 100 great sages. Yi Xian was speechless. Were there 100 great sages in a few super forces? They could not possibly slaughter the entire ancient god star field. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Xiao Han, can you devour those artifact spirits?" Xiao Han said, "I think so." Yi Xian said, "Devour Xiao Ta." "I think if you devour him, you will definitely break through immediately." Xiao Han. Xiao Ta suddenly jumped up. "Damn, young master, you are not human." Yi Xian laughed. Of course, he was joking. However, if Xiao Han really devoured Xiao Ta, he might really break through. Of course, he would not dare. His father would definitely skin him alive. There was still a little gap between him and Dad. He could not fight Dad head-on. At this time, Xiao Han suddenly said, "Young master, can you use me next time to kill someone?" Yi Xian smiled. "Why, you want to kill someone?" Xiao Han said excitedly, "Yes." Yi Xian laughed. "I want to hide and nurture the sword." The sword was the green mysterious sword, and the sword was also the green mysterious sword. The green mysterious sword and the power of the bloodline were his last trump cards. No, there was also the sword will of Dad. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked at the other two great sages of the minor heavens in the distance who were locked by his sword light. With a thought, the green mysterious sword directly absorbed the two people. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green mysterious sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, his whole body disappeared. Chi! In an instant, the spacetime in front of Yi Xian split, and the next moment, Yi Xian appeared in a palace hall. Qingcheng. Inside the hall, a woman in a dragon robe was reading memorials. "This chapter is not over, please continue." As if sensing something, the woman suddenly looked up. When she saw Yi Xian, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. This smile made all flowers pale in comparison. The woman was Tuoba Yen. Yi Xian walked up to Tuoba Yen, grabbed his hand, and said with a smile, "Did you miss me?" Tuoba Yen said softly, "Didn't you say you would come back once a month? How many months has it been?" Yi Xian gently hugged Tuoba Yen. "It's my fault." Tuoba Yen suddenly said, "Give me a child." Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. Tuoba Yen looked up at Yi Xian, blushing. "Can you do it?" Yi Xian blinked. "Don't you know if I can do it or not?" Tuoba Yen pinched Yi Xian's waist hard and said shyly, "You're asking for a beating." Yi Xian laughed. He carried Tuoba Yen and walked toward the inner hall. In the room, Yi Xian wrapped his arms around Tuoba Yen's slender waist and his hands slowly moved downwards. It's not suitable to write in detail here, so I've automatically omitted 10,000 words. Everyone, fill in the blanks. 5 days later. Early in the morning, Yi Xian lay in front of the stone steps of the hall. A warm sun slowly rose in the sky. The sunlight shone on his body, warm and very comfortable. At this moment, Tuoba Yen walked to Yi Xian's side. At this moment, she was no longer wearing the dragon robe, but white pajamas, and her graceful figure was unmistakable. Tuoba Yen sat beside Yi Xian and said softly, "I really want you to stay here." Yi Xian smiled. "I want that too. All these years, I'm a little tired of the days of fighting and killing outside. But the current me is not qualified to live an ordinary life. An ordinary life? In times of peace, that was not a difficult thing. But in a universe like this, it was too difficult. Did Qing, and I do anything wrong back then? We did nothing wrong. But Tendo destroyed the world, and countless people died tragically. In troubled times, being weak was wrong. Tuoba Yen said softly, I know. But I can't bear to part with you. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Yen, what do you like about me? Tuoba Yen blinked, then smiled. I like your shamelessness. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he burst out laughing. Tuoba Yen said softly, will I have children? Yi Xian said with a smile, if you're worried, then I'll have to work hard and stay for a few more days. With that, he disappeared on the spot with Tuoba Yen. 5 days later, Yi Xian left behind a spatial ring and went to Azure Water Academy. He gave Mo Yinchi the soul wood that the swordsman woman, Yi, had given him in the Mausoleum of Swords. Yi only wanted this child to live an ordinary life, and the academy was more suitable for him. At the very least, he must have the ability to rely on himself. Yi Xian also stored the cultivation methods, martial techniques, and swordsmanship insights that Yi had given him in a storage ring, and he gave this storage ring to Mo Yinchi. The child's future depended on his own choices. After handing over everything, Yi Xian left Azure Province. In front of the palace hall, Tuoba Yen looked at the horizon, her eyes filled with reluctance. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the distance. Your Majesty, everyone is waiting for you to attend court. The reluctance in Tuoba Yan's eyes disappeared. She turned and left. At this moment, she became the aloof empress again. Her gentleness was only for Yi Xian. After leaving Azure Province, Yi Xian went straight to the small grotto heaven. He did not like to be passive. He wanted to take the initiative. Didn't your small grotto heaven want to mess with me? Don't look for me. I'll do it myself. End of this chapter. Chapter 1798. Building. A woman in a green dress walked slowly to the front of the building and bowed slightly. Master, we have received news that Yi Xian is going to the small grotto heaven. Small grotto heaven. At this moment, the door suddenly opened and a man walked out slowly. The man wore a simple black robe and held a feather fan in his hand. The man smiled. This young Master Yi is going to the small grotto heaven of his own accord. The woman nodded. I think so. The man smiled. There's going to be a good show. The woman stood behind the man respectfully and did not speak. The man looked up at the sky and said softly, Yi Xian is not afraid of the small grotto heaven or the god's graveyard. The person behind him is definitely not ordinary. As he spoke, a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. But I have observed the universe and there is no force that can compare to the god's graveyard, the woman suddenly said. According to our investigation, Yi Xian disappeared for a period of time, but we can't find out where he went. The man turned to look at the woman. Even our people can't find him? The woman nodded. He disappeared very strangely. We can't find him even after entering the space-time tunnel. Not only did he disappear strangely, but he also appeared strangely. The man frowned slightly. This person is so mysterious. The woman suddenly said again, I have received news that someone came out of the god's graveyard. Hearing this, the man narrowed his eyes. Do you know who it is? The woman shook her head. I don't know yet. But our people are already looking for him. We should be able to find him. The man smiled. Prepare a big gift. If you know his whereabouts, inform me immediately. The woman said in a low voice, Master, you don't think Yi Xian can do it? The man shook his head. It's not that I don't think he can do it, but I think the god's graveyard is better. As he spoke, he gently waved his feather fan and a trace of seriousness flashed in his eyes. This is the god's graveyard. Even the supreme laws of the universe have to show some respect. At this point, he turned to look at the woman and said with a smile, Can Yi Xian make the supreme law of the universe give him face? Can he? Ha. In just a short while, the building's master disappeared with the woman. War Pavilion. Inside the main hall, all the experts had gathered. The master of the War Pavilion, Zhu Shao, said in a deep voice, Yi Xian went to the small grotto heaven. What do you think of this? Everyone fell silent. Zhu Shao looked at Elderly. What do you think? Elderly pondered for a moment and said, the person behind this person is definitely not weaker than the small cave heaven. But we don't know who the person behind him is. This boy is seriously too mysterious. Zhu Shao turned to look at an old man. Still haven't found out his background? The old man said in a deep voice, we only found one thing. He seems to be related to the swordsman who came to the ancient God Star region before. Those people are from the All-Heaven City, which is very far away from us. They seem to belong to a force called Sword Alliance. Sword Alliance. Zhu Shao frowned. What kind of force is that? The old man shook his head. I don't know the details, but they don't seem very strong. Those swordsmen are not weak, but most of them are only at the Great Qin realm. Zhu Shao said after a moment of silence, continue to investigate this sword alliance. The old man nodded. Understood. At this moment, Elderly suddenly said, Yi Xian helped the War Pavilion before, but now he is looking for the small grotto heaven. What do you think of this? Zhu Shao said after a moment of silence, if it's just a small grotto heaven, the War Pavilion will definitely help. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. We will help, but there is still God's graveyard. God's graveyard. Everyone in the main hall was silent. The War Pavilion was also afraid of that place. That was the #1 forbidden area. At this moment, Elderly suddenly said, then we can only wait and see. Zhu Shao nodded. That's the only way. Elderly said again, God's graveyard has sent someone. Should we show our support? Zhu Shao said after a moment of silence, prepare a big gift. I will deliver it personally. Great Spiritual God Palace. Xinjiang, the palace master of Great Spiritual God Palace, immediately summoned Yan Shi when he learned that Yi Xian was going to the small grotto heaven. Xinjiang said in a deep voice, what is he trying to do? Yan Shi said, based on his personality, I'm afraid he is going to fight to the death with the small grotto heaven. Xinjiang frowned slightly. Why? Yan Shi said softly, that's the most terrifying thing because we don't know what he is relying on. Xinjiang said indifferently, the sword in his hand contains the power of the supreme law, and the support of the small grotto heaven is also the supreme law of the universe. Then, he sneered. He is seeking his own death. Yan Shi glanced at Xinjiang. Palace Master, do you want him to die? Xinjiang said after a moment of silence, of course. Yan Shi sighed in his heart. Yi Xian's relationship with Great Spiritual God Palace was not very pleasant. Previously, Yi Xian had killed several people from Great Spiritual God Palace, which was quite embarrassing for Great Spiritual God Palace. At this moment, Xinjiang suddenly said, let's see how he is going to fight to the death with the small grotto heaven. Also, as far as I know, the god's graveyard has also sent someone out. Then, he paused and said, prepare a big gift. I want to meet him personally. Don't neglect it. After that, he disappeared on the spot. Sky Demon Kingdom. In a certain luxurious hall, an old man squatted in front of a brazier. Opposite him sat a woman with a whip. The woman wore an animal skin dress. Although it was not as beautiful as a human's dress, it exuded a sense of wildness and had a different kind of elegance. Both of them were roasting meat. The woman turned the wooden stick on the meat. Grandpa, I heard that there is a super monster called Yi Xian recently. This person defeated a genius from the god's graveyard. The old man smiled. Xiao wants to fight him? The woman nodded. Yes. The old man thought for a moment and said, he is a swordsman. The woman's lips curled up slightly. Can his sword break through my body? The old man fell silent. The woman glanced at the old man. Grandpa, you know him? The old man nodded. I know Dao Yi well. This person is not that simple. The woman was even more interested. She tore off a piece of meat and put it in her mouth. Then I want to fight him even more. The old man thought for a moment and said, you can go look for him. But don't become enemies with him. Understand? The woman nodded. Yes. After that, she carried the piece of meat and left. The old man suddenly said, aren't you going to leave some for Grandpa? The woman disappeared into the distance without looking back. The old man shook his head and smiled. Foodie. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared not far away from the old man. The middle-aged man said in a deep voice, Father, what do you think about Yi Xian going to the small grotto heaven? The old man replied indifferently, not really. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before he said, according to what I know, Yi Xian has sent someone out from the god's graveyard. Their target seems to be Yi Xian. The old man remained silent. The middle-aged man said, according to what I know, the great spiritual palace, the battle pavilion, and Xiao Lu have gone to look for that person from the god's graveyard. They want to build a good relationship with him. The old man suddenly said, what do you think of Yi Xian? The middle-aged man fell silent for a moment before he said, a genius. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression changed slightly. Father, don't tell me you intend to stand on his side? The old man said indifferently, are you afraid? The middle-aged man hurriedly nodded. Father, this is not a joke. If we choose to stand on Yi Xian's side, then it's equivalent to becoming enemies with the small grotto heaven and the god's graveyard. I'm afraid we can't bear the consequences. The old man remained expressionless. So, you want to stand on the small grotto heaven and the god's graveyard? The middle-aged man spoke in a low voice, the small grotto heaven is fine, but I think that we have to make friends with the god's graveyard. The old man gazed at the middle-aged man. What do you think of Yi Xian? He asked again. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before he said, he's a monstrous genius. The old man stared at the middle-aged man. What else? The middle-aged man laughed bitterly. Father, just speak your mind. The old man sighed softly. Do you know why I haven't passed on the throne to you? The middle-aged man spoke in a low voice. Father isn't satisfied with me. The old man said, I'm very dissatisfied with you. It wasn't easy for our Sky Demon Kingdom to develop to its current scale. Our Sky Demon Kingdom is very strong, but that's exactly why we have to be even more careful. Let me ask you, why did Yi Xian dare to go to the small grotto heaven? The middle-aged man said, he had something to rely on. The old man continued, why did he dare to kill someone from the god's graveyard? Was it because he was ignorant? The middle-aged Nji's expression gradually turned solemn. He isn't afraid of the god's graveyard. The old man nodded. That's the main point. He, Yi Xian, isn't afraid of the god's graveyard at all. Also. As he spoke, he slowly clenched his right hand. This person can instantly kill a great saint. Think about it, can an ordinary person or an ordinary force nurture such a genius? The middle-aged man fell silent. The old man continued, the god's graveyard is very strong, but can this Yi Xian be any weaker? The middle-aged man said in a low voice, make friends with Yi Xian? The old man shook his head. The middle-aged man was stunned. The old man suddenly spoke again, make friends with both sides. You go see the people from the god's graveyard, I'll go see this Yi Xian. The middle-aged man, the old man stood up and left. When he reached the door, he said, we'll only be friends, not enemies. They can fight their battles, we'll fight ours. With that, he disappeared. Inside the hall, the middle-aged man smiled bitterly. In an unknown mountain range, a sword light suddenly descended. The sword light dissipated, and Yi Xian appeared at the top of a mountain. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly sounded from afar. "Who dares to trespass into my small grotto heaven?" As the voice fell, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly split open, and an old man walked out. The old man looked at Yi Xian. "Who are you? What are you doing in my small grotto heaven?" The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. "Yi Xian." As he spoke, he paused, then said, "I'm here. Tu Zong. Tu Zong. P.S. Asking for votes." End of this chapter. Chapter 1799. Tu Zong. As soon as these words were spoken, the old man was instantly infuriated, and he was just about to speak when a ray of light flashed through his throat. Hiss. Before the old man could react, his head flew into the air along with a wisp of blood. Instant kill. After killing the old man, Yi Xian walked towards the grotto heaven. During this time, numerous powerful auras shot towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian kept walking into the distance with a calm look on his face. And with every step he took, a bloody head would fly into the sky in the distance. A flying sword with every step he took, and a head with every flying sword. In less than 10 breaths of time, more than 10 heads fell from the sky. Some of them were minor saints. They were all instant kills. No one could stop Yi Xian's flying sword. The experts that had rushed over in secret were extremely shocked when they witnessed this scene. It was too terrifying. Even a great saint couldn't stop Yi Xian's flying sword. The great spiritual palace master stared at Yi Xian. Why is his flying sword so fast? Yan Shi shook his head. I don't know. Looking at Yi Xian, the fear in the depths of the great spiritual divine palace's eyes became more and more intense. So did their killing intent. The speed of Yi Xian's flying sword was too terrifying. In the distance, Yi Xian had arrived at the other side of a mountain. During this time, no one came out to stop him. When Yi Xian stopped, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Kujia! Someone exclaimed in the dark. Kujia! He was the guardian of the grotto heaven. No one had expected that the grotto heaven would send out a guardian. However, it was normal. Ordinary people weren't a match for Yi Xian. Even a great saint couldn't stop Yi Xian's flying sword. Kujia looked at Yi Xian. You came to Tu Zong? Yi Xian smiled. Do you have a problem with that? Kujia looked Yi Xian in the eye. Let me see you. Just as he finished speaking, a flying sword suddenly slashed towards him. Kujia raised his right arm. Boom! A streak of sword light shattered as Kujia retreated 1,000 feet. However, he forcibly blocked Yi Xian's flying sword. Yi Xian glanced at Kujia's right arm. Under his right sleeve, there was a dark arm guard. Another divine item. Yi Xian shook his head. I look down on people who use external objects the most. How boring. Xiao Ta, in the distance, Kujia glanced at his bracer, and there was a deep gash on it. A trace of seriousness appeared in his eyes. If it wasn't for this bracer, he might have been instantly killed just now. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took another step forward. Kujia immediately raised his arm to block. Boom! When the sword light appeared, Kujia retreated another 1,000 feet. As soon as he stopped, another flying sword slashed at him. Boom! Kujia retreated another 1,000 feet. Just like that, every time Yi Xian took a step forward, Kujia would retreat 100 feet. The countless gazes in the surroundings had become extremely solemn when they witnessed this scene. This was too terrifying. Kujia was not an ordinary great sage. He was a veteran great sage who had become a great sage tens of thousands of years ago. This was a true great sage. However, even such a super expert was not a match for Yi Xian. He was hung up and beaten by Yi Xian. Finally, when Yi Xian took the 10th step, the bracer on Kujia's right arm exploded, and at practically the same time, a flying sword slashed straight towards him. Kujia's pupils shrank, and he stamped his right foot down. Condense. As his voice fell, the space around him suddenly condensed into a spatial barrier. Not only that, there was also a temporal dimensional barrier. At this moment, the area where Kujia was located was practically impregnable. However, under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian's sword landed on his right arm. Hiss. Kujia's right arm flew into the air. It was like the spatial barrier and temporal barrier didn't exist at all. The eyes of countless experts in the surroundings were filled with disbelief when they witnessed this scene. Why is Yi Xian's flying sword able to disregard both space and time? Kujia's eyes were filled with disbelief as well. Right at this moment, a flying sword suddenly slashed towards him. It was extremely swift, and he didn't even have the time to react before it was already standing on his head. Bang! Kujia was pushed over 1 kilometer back. However, he didn't die. Because a ray of dark golden light had obstructed Yi Xian's flying sword. Yi Xian frowned when he witnessed this scene. You're using external forces again. Don't you think it's shameful to use external forces? Kujia stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and the fear in his eyes had transformed into a trace of terror. Yi Xian's flying sword is too terrifying. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. This step caused Kujia's expression to instantly change drastically, and he was just about to strike with his fist. However, he was still too late. A flying sword had slashed down directly against his head. Bang! Light erupted from the sword, and then Kujia was pushed over 1 kilometer back. However, he just retreated when numerous flying swords slashed down towards him. Bang! 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 Kujia retreated explosively. When he'd retreated for an entire 30 kilometers, the dark barrier of light around him had suddenly shattered, and a sword had pierced through the space between his brows at practically the exact same moment. Hiss! Kujia's figure instantly became illusory. Everyone here was stunned. He's dead. A great saint has perished just like that. Kujia, who hadn't died yet, stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Who exactly are you? At this moment, he finally realized that they'd been underestimating Yi Xian all along. They'd greatly underestimated him. Earlier, they'd even sent some mortal severing realm experts to kill Yi Xian. Now that he thought about it, it was truly too laughable. Yi Xian walked over to Kujia and gazed at him. I'm Yi Xian. As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew the green profound sword and stabbed it into Kujia's body. Bang! At the instant that the green profound sword entered Kujia's body, Kujia's expression instantly changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with terror. He swiftly turned around to look towards the direction of the heaven abode. He wanted to say something, but he didn't have the chance. The green profound sword had directly absorbed his soul. It was completely gone. Yi Xian put the green profound sword away and continued forward. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Bang! In an instant, the space around Yi Xian had started to burn. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. As the sword slashed down, a wave of sword radiance instantly shattered the flames, and he himself was forced to retreat several hundred feet away. After stopping, Yi Xian looked at the old man. At this moment, Shaolinlang's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. This person is the cave master of the heaven abode, Mu Su. He reached the great sage level hundreds of thousands of years ago, and now he's even more unfathomable. The cave master had come out. Yi Xian looked at Mu Su and smiled. So you're the one who's been chasing after me and trying to kill me? Mu Su looked at Yi Xian coldly. I admit that I've underestimated you. Yi Xian laughed out loud. I have no grudges with your small grotto heaven, but your small grotto heaven kept chasing after me. As he spoke, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. You don't have to chase after me everywhere, I'll do it myself. Right now, I, Yi Xian, am standing in front of your heaven abode. I, Yi Xian, beg for your life. Beg for his life. His voice was like thunder, shaking the heavens. Someone was begging for his life in front of the heaven abode. Muxuhi stared at Yi Xian. As you wish. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. In the distance, Yi Xian shifted his consciousness, and a flying sword slashed towards Mu Su. Mu Su, on the other hand, did not dodge and allowed the flying sword to strike his chest. Bang! Space instantly shattered into pieces, but Mu Su was completely unharmed. At the same time, he'd appeared in front of Yi Xian, and then he smashed his fist towards Yi Xian. With this punch, the space around Yi Xian instantly ignited. Yi Xian did not retreat. He rushed forward, drew his sword, and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. As soon as the sword was drawn, a wave of sword light swept out from Yi Xian's scabbard like a tide. Rumble. A world-shaking explosion resounded as both Yi Xian and Mu Su retreated explosively at the same time. As they retreated, countless flying swords struck Mu Su, but Mu Shui was completely unharmed. After he stopped moving, Yi Xian gazed at Mu Su, and he noticed that there was a palm-sized black mirror on Mu Su's chest. His flying sword had been stopped by this black mirror. Meanwhile, Xiao Linlong's voice resounded once more in his mind. This is the heavenly abode mirror, and there's an abode within it. It's the number one precious treasure of the minor abode. It's a superb ancient god-ranked treasure. A divine treasure. Yi Xian instantly flared up with rage when he heard this, and he gazed at Mu Su. How shameless. It's fine if you're bullying the weak, but you're actually using an external treasure. How shameless of you to even use an external object. As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings. Does everyone think he's shameless? The others were speechless. Mu Su's expression was extremely unsightly. He wanted to be shameless as well. However, the flying sword's speed was so terrifying that even he wasn't confident that he could block it. That wasn't the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that Yi Xian didn't expend much effort to send out these flying swords, and he could send out as many as he wanted. Even if he blocked one flying sword, what about the second and third? He had no choice but to use an external treasure. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Mu Su. Do you dare not use an external treasure? Let's have a fair fight. Mu Su stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Why should I not use an external treasure? Yi Xian said angrily, I'm only at the Heaven Ascension realm. What about you? You're already a great saint. How many realms higher are you than me? But now, we're fighting one-on-one, and you still want to use an external treasure? Doesn't your conscience hurt? Mu Su's expression grew increasingly unsightly, and he couldn't help but curse. Heaven Ascension realm. You're only at the Heaven Ascension realm? Which Heaven Ascension realm cultivator is like you? You can kill a great saint at the drop of a hat. In fact, he was also extremely puzzled. This guy was indeed only at the Heaven Ascension realm. But why was he so terrifying? Not only Mu Su, but everyone present was puzzled. This was killing someone who was several realms above him. At this moment, Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but Mu Su suddenly said, Yi Xian, don't talk nonsense. If I use an external treasure, you can use it too. Yi Xian stared at Mu Su. I usually don't use external treasures. Mu Su looked coldly at Yi Xian. Don't you want to be fair? Isn't it fair if you use an external treasure? Come on, use an external treasure. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, I don't think it's good to use external treasures. Let's have a fair fight. Mu Su said angrily, if you use an external treasure, then it's a fair fight, quickly use it. Yi Xian nodded, as you wish. As he spoke, the sword in his hand turned into the green profound sword, and he casually swung it. A sword light directly slashed at Mu Su's chest. Boom! The heavenly abode mirror directly turned into nothingness, and at the same time, Mu Su's physical body also disappeared in an instant, and the green profound sword was already stabbed into his chest. Everyone present was petrified. Mu Su looked at Yi Xian in a daze. Your external treasure is so strong. Chapter 1800. he was instantly killed. Everyone in the surroundings was petrified. Even Xinjiang and the others from the great spiritual divine palace were stunned on the spot, and their minds were blank. Why would Mu Su need anyone? He was the current master of the small heaven. The peak of the great saint realm. The kind that didn't rely on anything. But now, he was instantly killed by Yi Xian with a single strike of his sword. The scene in front of him was as unreal as a dream. Actually, Yi Xian was quite shocked as well. It was the first time he had used the azure sword. He hadn't expected the azure sword to be so terrifying. Not only did he destroy an ancient god-rank super treasure with a single strike, but he had also instantly killed Mu Su. That was too terrifying. Moreover, he hadn't executed any sword technique just now. It was just a casual strike. If he had executed the sword of life and death or the flying sword technique, after all, the azure sword was more suitable to be used as a flying sword than the spacetime sword. Suddenly, Mu Su, who was still alive, spoke with a trembling voice. That's impossible. Yi Xian looked at Mu Su with a helpless expression. I didn't want to use external objects, but I had no choice. You forced me to use them. See, now you're in an awkward situation. The battle is over in an instant. How boring. Everyone was speechless. Mu Su roared furiously, that's impossible. Your sword, Yi Xian interrupted Mu Su, nothing is impossible. Summon the ancestor. Summon the ancestor. The expressions of everyone here had become strange. Is he going to fight the ancestor of the small heaven? That's not a great saint, but a true ancient god realm expert. Suddenly, Xiao Linlang's voice resounded in Yi Xian's mind. Young Master Yi, the ancestor of the small heaven is a true ancient god realm expert. A great saint can't compare to such an expert. Don't underestimate him. Yi Xian turned to look at her and smiled. Thank you for your kindness, but I can only fight ancient god realm masters now, can't I? Xiao Linlang fell silent. Great saint? Even if Yi Xian didn't use that terrifying sword in his hand, he would still be able to kill him instantly. If he used that sword, the great sage would be like an ant in front of Yi Xian. Only an ancient god realm master was qualified to be Yi Xian's opponent. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly gazed at Mu Su and said, It's fine if you don't want to summon your ancestor. Just watch and see how I slaughter your tiny abode. With that said, he took a step forward. With this step, more than a dozen flying swords suddenly flew down in all directions. Chi 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 chi. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 bloody heads shot up into the sky. Slaughter the sect. The expressions of the experts in the surroundings changed when they witnessed this scene. When Yi Xian said that he wanted to slaughter the sect, it was not a joke. He really wanted to slaughter the sect. Slaughter the small grotto heavens. In the small cave, how could those experts resist Yi Xian's flying swords? As soon as Yi Xian issued a command, countless experts in the small cave were killed. Mu Su's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he roared furiously, Yi Xian. Don't you dare. Yi Xian did not pay any attention to Mu Su. He took another step forward, and a beam of sword light flew down and went straight into the small cave below. Hiss. A single flying sword instantly killed over a dozen experts. Those ordinary experts in the small cave didn't even have the chance to dodge before Yi Xian's flying sword. They were instantly killed. Suddenly, a huge beam of light shot into the sky from the small cave below, and it blasted towards Yi Xian. A formation. Moreover, it wasn't just a single formation. Over a dozen formations were activated at the same time, and more than a dozen beams of light shot towards Yi Xian like sharp arrows. However, these beams of light hadn't even gotten close to Yi Xian before they were slashed into pieces by the flying swords. When the flying swords entered the small cave below, another dozen heads flew into the air. Suddenly, another dozen or so heads flew out. He was suppressing the entire small cave by himself. The experts in the dark had extremely solemn expressions when they witnessed this scene. Is Yi Xian really only at the Heaven Ascension realm? The slaughter continued. Every time Yi Xian took a step forward, a few bloody heads would fly into the air. He was invincible. Qin Jiang, the palace master of the great spiritual god palace, stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, his right hand was trembling. He was both fearful and glad. He was glad that he didn't fight to the death with Yi Xian that day. Otherwise, the great spiritual god palace would be finished. Who could stop Yi Xian? Only an ancient god realm master could do that. A great saint was like an ant before Yi Xian, and they couldn't even withstand a single blow. On the other side, Xiao Linlang was staring at Yi Xian. At the moment, she was also extremely shocked. She hadn't expected that Yi Xian's strength would be so strong. At this moment, she was curious about the green-robed man. Because Yi Xian was the green-robed man's son. She had seen the green-robed man before, but only once. Therefore, she didn't know the green-robed man's strength. But now, it seemed that the green-robed man's strength was much stronger than she had imagined. If he wasn't strong, how could he cultivate a monstrous genius like Yi Xian? At this time, Mu Su suddenly roared, "Yi Xian!" Yi Xian stopped and looked at Mu Su. Mu Su snarled, "Do you want to die together with us?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Die together? You're so funny. Didn't you want to kill me first? How did it turn into me wanting to die together with you?" Mu Su stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You've killed enough." Yi Xian smiled. "Is it a lot?" "No. I don't think it's a lot at all." Yi Xian continued to walk away. "I, Yi Xian, am a person. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I'll definitely kill them. Today, I, Yi Xian, will slaughter this small grotto heaven." As soon as he finished speaking, more than a dozen sword lights slashed down from the sky. In a split second, more than a dozen heads flew into the air. Mu Su suddenly roared, "Then we'll die together." He turned to look at the deepest part of the small grotto heaven. "Summon the ancestors. Summon the ancestors." As soon as he finished speaking, a white light pillar shot up to the sky from the deepest part of the small grotto heaven. Boom! In the depths of the clouds, a giant black vortex suddenly appeared, and in the next moment, a terrifying pressure swept down like a tidal wave. In an instant, the entire world was boiling. An ancient god realm master. Below, countless people's faces turned solemn. A true ancient god realm master. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the black vortex. Meanwhile, an old man stepped out slowly from within the black vortex. As soon as the old man's foot descended, the entire world seemed to become illusory. The world here couldn't endure the old man's strength at all. Countless people had solemn expressions on their faces. This was a true ancient god realm master. Countless experts of the small grotto heaven knelt to the old man, "Greetings, ancestor." Even Mu Su, who wasn't completely dead, bowed deeply. Actually, he didn't really want to summon the ancestors. Because it was the small grotto heaven's final trump card. It would be gone after he used it once. However, he had no choice but to use it. If he didn't, then Yi Xian would really slaughter the entire small grotto heaven. The old man who stood before the black vortex glanced at the surroundings, and a trace of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. It had been too long. Moreover, it was only a strand of his soul. So, his memories were slightly blurry. But it didn't take long for the old man's bewilderment to clear up, and he looked down at the small grotto heaven. "Is my small grotto heaven in danger?" "Next." Mu Su hurriedly said, "Yes." As he spoke, he turned around and pointed angrily at Yi Xian. "He wants to destroy my small grotto heaven." The old man looked at Yi Xian, and he frowned slightly when he saw Yi Xian. "Heaven Ascension Realm?" "Heaven Ascension Realm." Mu Su's expression was slightly unsightly. "He's at the Heaven Ascension Realm, but his strength is slightly strange." The old man stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and then he suddenly said, "May I know if you can hold back?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, "I can't. The old man nodded lightly, then bring it on. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward. A terrifying aura enveloped Yi Xian as soon as his step descended. At the same time, a footprint descended from the sky in a straight line, and everywhere the footprint passed, space was instantly obliterated. This footprint was truly capable of destroying the heavens and the earth. The expressions of all the experts here had changed. This was an ancient god realm expert. This wasn't something a great saint could compare to. Even a strand of his soul wasn't something a great saint could compare to. Could Yi Xian stop it? Everyone turned to look at Yi Xian. As he watched the footprint descend, Yi Xian became excited. An expert. This was a true expert. A great saint? What's that? He, Yi Xian, wanted to fight against a powerhouse at this level. Yi Xian suddenly laughed, bring it on. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward, drew his sword, and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. As the sword slashed out, a sword cry instantly shook the heavens. Boom! Under everyone's gazes, Yi Xian's sword slashed at the footprint. Draw the sword to decide life and death that was stacked over 400 times. Rumble. The footprint instantly shattered, and Yi Xian retreated nearly 10,000 zhang in the blink of an eye. As soon as he stopped, a smear of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian was defeated? Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He raised his head to look at the old man, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Again. As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly dashed forward, drew his sword, and slashed again. Draw the sword to decide life and death. At this moment, the killing intent in his eyes swept across the world like a tidal wave. He didn't use the profound azure sword, but the mausoleum of swords. With a swing of his sword, the entire world was annihilated inch by inch. The old man's eyes flashed with astonishment. The power of Yi Xian's sword was a little beyond his expectations. After all, Yi Xian was only at the Heaven Ascension realm. Without hesitation, the old man took a step forward and punched out. Rumble. The space in front of him directly turned into a groove vortex, and Yi Xian's sword was directly shattered. But at this moment, more than a dozen flying swords directly slashed at the old man at an extremely fast speed. However, the old man merely flicked his finger. Boom! The dozen or so sword lights directly exploded and turned into nothingness. At this moment, Yi Xian's flying swords lost their effectiveness. At this moment, Yi Xian had already retreated thousands of zhang away. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the old man said, "You're very good, but for me, you're still far from it." Is that so? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. He slowly walked toward the old man, and the next moment, the blood in his body directly boiled. The power of the bloodline. Boom! The moment the power of the bloodline was activated, the mausoleum of sword in Yi Xian's hand directly trembled violently, and then it directly turned blood red. The mausoleum of swords suddenly said, F***CK, what a terrifying killing intent. Master, you're not a good person. Yi Xian. Chapter 1801. The expressions of everyone here changed when Yi Xian's killing intent surged out. Killing intent. The strength of Yi Xian's killing intent exceeded their expectations. The first ancestor of the lesser heaven who stood before Yi Xian stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Bloodline energy. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss. A ray of blood-red light flashed through the battlefield. Life and death were decided by drawing the sword. However, it wasn't 400 overlapped this time, it was 480 overlapped. This sword strike caused the entire world to explode. The old man's expression changed at this moment. What a terrifying attack. The old man didn't even have the time to thank Shen Shi before he smashed his fist forward. It was a head-on attack. Rumble. As a ray of blood-red light erupted, the old man was instantly pushed 30 kilometers back. Moreover, Yi Xian was pushed back as well. However, he'd only been pushed back by a few kilometers. The countenances of the experts from the lesser abodes instantly turned pale when they witnessed this scene. The eyes of the experts in the surroundings were filled with disbelief as well. Yi Xian had actually repelled an ancient god realm expert. Even though it was only a strand of his soul, it was still an ancient god realm expert. But Yi Xian was only at the heaven ascension realm. Their minds were in chaos. The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian as well. How could this be possible? In theory, it was absolutely impossible for Yi Xian to injure him. Because the gap between them was too huge. No external force could make up for that gap. However, Yi Xian had injured him. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss! A ray of blood-red light flashed and slashed down towards the old man. A trace of seriousness flashed through the old man's eyes, and then he took a step forward and pressed his finger against the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Bang! The ray of blood-red light shattered, and then both of them retreated explosively. As they retreated, over a dozen blood-red flying swords slashed down towards the old man. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly as he smashed his fist forward. Boom! The dozen or so blood-colored flying swords instantly shattered, but his soul became even more illusory. Every time he attacked, it consumed a great deal of energy. After all, this wasn't his main body. Murderous intent appeared in the old man's eyes. He had to kill Yi Xian. If he didn't kill Yi Xian, once he disappeared, the small grotto heaven would really be gone. Sensing the killing intent in the old man's eyes, Yi Xian laughed. You want to kill me? Come, I beg you to kill me. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward again. Chi! A ray of sword light tore through the battlefield. In the distance, the old man stomped his right foot, and the space in front of him suddenly distorted. Space-time strangulation. When Yi Xian's sword entered the distorted space, the sword light instantly shattered. Yi Xian was shocked. He quickly retreated and looked at the strange space-time in front of the old man. A trace of astonishment flashed through his eyes. An ancient god realm master was not as simple as he thought. Looking at Yi Xian, the old man was even more shocked. Is this guy really only at the heaven ascension realm? This guy's cultivation realm is indeed only at the heaven ascension realm, but his battle strength far exceeds that of a saint. If this guy becomes a great saint, the old man didn't dare to continue the thought. Great saint. This kid must die. The murderous intent in the old man's eyes intensified. He looked at Yi Xian, opened his palm, and a black square seal appeared in his hand. Yi Xian glanced at the black square seal in the old man's hand and frowned slightly. You want to use a foreign object again? The old man looked at the black square seal in his hand and muttered a few words. In the next moment, the black square seal trembled. Not far away, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A ray of sword light instantly appeared in front of the old man. The old man suddenly raised his head, and the black square seal in his hand turned into a ray of black light and shot out. Boom! Under everyone's gazes, Yi Xian's sword light was shattered in an instant, and he himself was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. Not only that, in the process of retreating, he spat out a mouthful of blood. And when he stopped, the sword ruins in his hand was directly covered with countless cracks. Seeing this scene, everyone present looked at the black seal in the old man's hand. What is this? Everyone was curious and puzzled. In the distance, the old man slowly raised his hand, and on the black square seal in his hand was a thumb-sized figure. The figure's right hand was behind his back, and although it was small, it had an extraordinary bearing. At this moment, the figure suddenly laughed. Wen Xiu, you were actually forced to this extent by a heaven ascension little boy, how interesting. The old man called Wen Xiu was expressionless. 10 directions, this person is not simple. The figure looked at Yi Xian in the distance, and then he sized up Yi Xian, and then said, he is indeed not simple. To have such battle strength at such a young age, even in my era, he would be considered a monster. At this moment, Zhu Xiao suddenly walked out from the darkness in the distance. Zhu Xiao looked at the figure, and said in a trembling voice, "Are you the 10 Directions Martial Saint?" 10 Directions Martial Saint. As soon as these words were spoken, the palace master of the great spiritual god palace and the monarch of the sky demon kingdom looked at the figure. At this moment, the figure laughed. "I never thought that in this era, there would actually be someone who knows of me." Zhu Xiao hurriedly bowed respectfully when he heard the figure admit it. "I am the pavilion master of the battle pavilion, greet Senior Shifang." 10 Directions Martial Saint. This was a legendary figure. Moreover, he was a super monster. It was said that he started martial arts at the age of 5, attained the saint realm at the age of 10, attained the ancient god realm at the age of 20, and became a martial saint at the age of 25. His entire life was like a cheat. There was no one in the past, and no one in the future could surpass him. Most importantly, Shifang was the only person who had entered the god's tomb and come out. The reason why Zhu Xiao was so excited was that the ancestor of the battle pavilion had once received guidance from the 10 Directions Martial Saint. Shifang glanced at Zhu Xiao, battle pavilion. "You are Mo Chi's successor?" Zhu Xiao hurriedly said, "Yes." Shifang glanced at Zhu Xiao, and then shook his head. "You are too weak. You are much weaker than your martial ancestor." Zhu Xiao felt slightly embarrassed when he heard this. Naturally, he was much weaker than the martial ancestor of the battle pavilion. Shifang looked at Yi Xian, and then he glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "You possess such combat strength at such a young age. You are really not simple. However, I'm afraid it will be impossible for you to destroy this small abode today." Yi Xian was about to speak when the ancestor of the small abode, Wen Xiu, suddenly said, "Shifang, you owed me a favor all those years ago. If you kill this person today, I will forget about that favor." Shifang fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "If I attack, I will be bullying the weak." Wen Xiu shook his head. "This person cannot be allowed to live, or my small abode will be in danger." Shifang glanced at Yi Xian, and then he said with a smile, "Indeed." Wen Xiu looked at Shifang, "Please." Shifang laughed, "Then I will kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at Yi Xian, "Little fellow, there is no enmity between us, but I owe this old fellow a favor. Today, he wants me to return the favor, but there is nothing I can do." "So, you..." Yi Xian suddenly laughed. "What nonsense are you talking about?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slashed out with his sword. Before anyone could react, the small black seal had been shattered, and Shifang had instantly retreated hundreds of thousands of feet away. Everyone was stunned again, including Wen Xiu. Soon, Wen Xiu looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. It was no longer the mausoleum of swords, but the azure mystic sword. When he saw the azure mystic sword, Wen Xiu's expression instantly changed. "This sword actually contains the power of the law of the universe." "You? How is this possible?" Yi Xian ignored Wen Xiu, and he looked at Shifang in the distance. "Didn't you want to kill me? Come on." At this moment, Shifang's body was very illusory. That sword had almost destroyed him. If it wasn't for the black seal that had resisted most of the force, he would have been dead by now. Shifang stared fixedly at the azure mystic sword in Yi Xian's hand. "Supreme Law Quintessence Energy." Yi Xian smiled. "Didn't you want to kill me? Come on." As soon as he finished speaking, he swung his sword again. Hiss! A strand of sword light tore through the air. In the distance, Shifang's expression instantly changed, and he suddenly charged forward and blasted his fist forward. A powerful force instantly swept through the heavens and the earth, and the mountains in an area of hundreds of thousands of kilometers collapsed at this moment. A single punch shattered the heavens and the earth. However, even such a terrifying punch hadn't been able to stop Yi Xian's sword. Bang! Everyone watched as Shifang retreated explosively by tens of thousands of zhang, and when he stopped, he was almost translucent. Shifang gazed at Yi Xian with slight disbelief. Who forged that sword of yours? Yi Xian didn't waste his breath at all, and he was just about to attack again when Wen Xiu spoke abruptly. How dare you? Yi Xian turned around to look at Wen Xiu, and Wen Xiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. How dare you steal an exalt's quintessence energy? Steal? Yi Xian frowned slightly, and he was just about to retort when he thought about it again. The qing didn't seem to have been stolen, it was taken by force. Taking by force seems to be worse than stealing. That's quite embarrassing. Meanwhile, when Xiu spoke abruptly, the person behind you actually dared to steal an exalt's quintessence energy? How audacious. Yi Xian gazed at Wen Xiu. Do you have a problem with that? Wen Xiu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You're courting death. Yi Xian nodded. I beg you to kill me. Beg you to kill me. Everyone was speechless. Wen Xiu was just about to attack when he seemed to have thought of something, and he glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. He was extremely fearful of that sword. Regardless of whether it was Shifang or him, they weren't a match for Yi Xian right now. Yi Xian's sword was too terrifying. Wen Xiu fell silent for a short moment, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. He withdrew an incense stick and lit it up. If it was anyone else, then perhaps they wouldn't be able to deal with you. Unfortunately, you encountered me. Because I was once acquainted with an exalt. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in the sky suddenly split apart, and then a strand of terrifying pressure swept down. In an instant, it wasn't just the minor abode, even the distant ancient god galaxy was trembling. The supreme laws of the universe. At this moment, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically. The minor abode can summon the supreme laws. Suddenly, the emperor of the great spiritual god palace stepped forward, and he gazed at Yi Xian and roared furiously, Yi Xian, you've indiscriminately slaughtered the innocent. From this moment onward, my great spiritual god palace will fight you to the death. Obviously, he wanted to choose a side as soon as possible. The master of the battle pavilion, Zhu Shao, was clearly hesitant. He wanted to choose a side as well, but the battle pavilion owed a debt to Yi Xian. Zhu Shao didn't hesitate for long before he stood behind Wen Xiu in the end. The supreme laws of the universe. He could only choose to stand with the minor abode and draw a clear line between himself and Yi Xian. Otherwise, if the minor abode mistakenly thought that the battle pavilion was on Yi Xian's side, then it would be a huge problem. On the other side, the emperor of the heavenly demon kingdom hesitated for a moment, but he didn't choose a side in the end, and he just silently retreated to the side. He was afraid of the supreme laws of the universe as well. But it was exactly why he didn't choose a side. Why? Damn it. The supreme laws of the universe are so terrifying. Who could possibly steal the energy of her laws? Isn't that nonsense? Therefore, he decided to wait and see. Under everyone's gaze, a woman slowly walked over from the horizon. When he saw the woman, Wen Xiu immediately bowed respectfully. Greetings, Supreme Master. Behind him, the experts of the minor abode also bowed respectfully. As for Shifang, he hesitated for a moment before bowing slightly. Jianghu was extremely excited. He quickly bowed respectfully and said with a trembling voice, Greetings, Supreme Master. Zhu Shao hesitated for a moment before bowing deeply as well. Greetings, Supreme Master. The woman didn't look at anyone. She only looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Wen Xiu suddenly said, Supreme Master, this person stole the energy of your origin law. The woman ignored Jianghu and looked at Yi Xian. You, at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly wiped away his tears. You bullied me. Where's my sister? Someone bullied me. Hearing this, the woman's expression changed drastically. P.S. Thanks, Jianxiang Diamond Tool Factory's reader, Alliance Master's gift. There are also many gifts from friends. For the first time in a year, I'm in the top 10 of the monthly votes ranking. I'm really touched. Thank you, everyone, for your support. With so many people supporting me today, even with my thick skin, I'm embarrassed to upload 2 chapters. I won't say much. I'm really grateful to all my friends who support me. I still want to write for another 10 years. Oh, no, I still want to write for another 10 years. I'll always be with you. Chapter 1802. Qing-er. A woman in a plain dress. When the supreme law of the universe heard Yi Xian say this name, she was horrified. She hurriedly said, "When did I bully you?" Yi Xian glanced at Wen Xiao and said with slight grievance, "You're with them." The woman immediately said, "Nonsense." As she spoke, she turned to look at Wen Xiao. "Is there something wrong with you?" As soon as these words came out, Wen Xiao and the others were stunned. "What's going on?" The woman stared at Wen Xiao. "Are you retarded?" Everyone. Wen Xiao was stunned. "Supreme Exalt, you." The woman flew into a rage. "What? Do I know you that well?" Huh. At this moment, she was really about to go mad with anger. She had almost been killed by the people of the small grotto heaven. Yet now, the small grotto heaven had actually summoned her to kill Yi Xian. Kill Yi Xian. Damn it. Can this fellow be killed? He can't even move. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. This Supreme Exalt knows Yi Xian? That was what they were thinking. The Supreme Law suddenly shook his head. "When I met you, I thought you were a good person and wanted to form a good relationship with you. But I never expected you to be as brainless as your descendant." Wen Xiao said with a trembling voice, "Supreme Exalt, you know him?" The Supreme Law looked at Wen Xiao. "I do." "No." As soon as he spoke, the faces of Chen Jiang and Zhu Shao instantly turned ghastly pale. So Yi Xian knows the Supreme Law. Wen Xiao immediately bowed deeply. "Supreme Exalt, this is a misunderstanding." Yi Xian suddenly said, "It's not a misunderstanding." Everyone looked at Yi Xian while Yi Xian looked at the Supreme Law. "Senior, do you want to protect this small grotto heaven?" The Supreme Law fell silent for a while before saying, "Can you let them leave their inheritance?" "I owe you a favor." Yi Xian smiled. "I can't defeat you, so I'll leave it if you say so." With that, he turned around and left. Meanwhile, the Supreme Law's expression changed, and she hurriedly said, "Wait." Yi Xian stopped and smiled. "Is there anything else, Senior?" The Supreme Law hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Do you have resentment in your heart?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No. Because I can't beat you." Hearing that, the Supreme Law sighed softly. "You call this no resentment?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Senior, with your protection, I won't be able to destroy them," but, as he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. "Let's not talk about it anymore." With that, he turned around and left. The Supreme Laws suddenly appeared before Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the Supreme Laws without saying a word. The Supreme Law sighed softly. "Can you just leave behind a legacy?" Yi Xian looked straight at the Supreme Law and didn't say anything. The Supreme Law was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly withdrew the green profound sword. The Supreme Law's expression instantly changed when she saw this sword. She wasn't afraid of this sword. She was afraid of the person who'd forged this sword. Yi Xian smiled. "Senior, the tiny abode has sent people to kill me time and time again. If I didn't have some strength, it would be impossible for me to stand before you. I, Yi Xian, am a person who repays kindness with kindness and enmity with enmity. I won't be able to destroy the tiny abode today. That's because I'm weak, and I don't blame anyone. But in the future, I'll definitely destroy their entire sect." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. Everyone was slightly stunned by this scene. This fellow doesn't even give face to the Supreme Law. Wen Xiao was stunned as well. It doesn't seem like the Supreme Being and Yi Xian just know each other. Right at this moment, the Supreme Law of Nature at the side suddenly sighed. "Forget it. I won't interfere in this matter anymore." However, Yi Xian still didn't stop. At the sight of this, the Supreme Law blocked Yi Xian's path again. This time, Yi Xian frowned. The Supreme Law looked at Yi Xian. I won't interfere anymore. However, Yi Xian shook his head. I won't kill them anymore. The Supreme Law was puzzled. Why? Yi Xian said calmly, if they call for help, I'll call for help as well. I'll let Qing handle this matter. As he spoke, he took out the green profound sword, and the green profound sword in his hand started vibrating violently. At the sight of this, the Supreme Law's expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly said, Wait. Yi Xian looked at the Supreme Law, and the Supreme Law said solemnly, I've said it. I won't interfere in this matter anymore. If you want to kill me, go ahead. However, Yi Xian didn't care about her at all. Instead, he continued to activate the green profound sword. Numerous sword hums shot into the sky and shook the clouds. The Supreme Law was greatly alarmed, and she hurriedly said, Why bother her for such a small matter? I'll help you deal with it. Yi Xian looked at the Supreme Law. Aren't you in cahoots with them? The Supreme Law said angrily, Nonsense. As she spoke, she looked at Wen Xiu. The latter said in a trembling voice, Supremacy, this. The Supreme Law's expression was calm. She waved her right hand, and the entire grotto heaven below instantly turned into nothingness. With just a wave of her hand, the entire grotto heaven was directly wiped out. It was simple and direct. At the sight of this, everyone's expression changed drastically. As for Wen Xiu, he looked at the Supreme Law in a daze. This. Why? The Supreme Law glanced coldly at Wen Xiu. Think about it in your next life. As she spoke, she waved her sleeve. Bang! Wen Xiu was instantly wiped out. Truly wiped out. On the other side, Mu Su, the master of the grotto heaven who hadn't completely died, suddenly said in a trembling voice, Supremacy, you. The Supreme Law waved casually. Bang! Mu Su was instantly turned into nothingness. Subsequently, the Supreme Law turned to look at the great spiritual divine palace's palace master, Jianghu. The latter's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly said, Supremacy, we have nothing to do with the grotto heaven. Yi Xian suddenly said, Didn't you just say that you'll fight me to the death? Jianghu hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, the great spiritual divine palace. Yi Xian turned to look at the Supreme Law. I'm not familiar with him. The Supreme Law waved casually. Bang! Jianghu was instantly wiped out. After killing Jianghu, the Supreme Law looked at Zhu Shao, who was at the side. Zhu Shao smiled bitterly. Little friend Yi, my battle pavilion, Yi Xian said again, we're not familiar with each other. The Supreme Law waved again. Bang! Zhu Shao was directly wiped out. The Supreme Law looked at the heavenly demon nation's monarch. The latter bowed slightly, then looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, Senior, you may leave. It was the heavenly demon nation's monarch who did not pick a side just now. The heavenly demon nation's monarch cupped his fists. Thank you. After saying that, he turned around and left. He did not want to stay here even a moment longer. Only the martial saint of 10 directions was left in the field. The Supreme Law looked at the martial saint of 10 directions who had been silent all this while. The latter smiled faintly. Supremacy, there's something I don't understand. The Supreme Law looked at the martial saint of 10 directions. You're not qualified to make me explain anything. As she said that, she flicked her sleeves. In the distance, the martial saint of 10 directions' expression changed drastically. He suddenly put his palms together. Boundless heaven and earth. As soon as he said that, a huge figure suddenly appeared in the sky. The next moment, the figure directly punched down. It was going head-on against the laws of the universe. Rumble. As soon as the two powerful forces came into contact, the huge figure instantly crumbled, and the martial saint of 10 directions was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, his wisp of soul began to disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye. He still could not block the Supreme Law's attack. Yi Xian could not help but look at the supreme law. Damn it, this woman is so terrifying. The current him was no match for this woman at all. Even if he used the green profound sword, he might not be a match for her. The supreme law looked around. There were still some people hidden in the surroundings. She frowned slightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pointed at Xiao Linlang in the distance. I know her. The supreme law nodded and waved her right hand. Boom! Within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles, all the experts hidden in the dark were wiped out. They were all killed. Yi Xian looked at the supreme law. His intuition told him that she was angry. Because there was absolutely no need to kill the others. But she still killed them. It must be because he did not give her face just now. At the thought of this, Yi Xian cupped his fists. Thank you, senior. The supreme law looked at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. Senior, I don't have anything against you. It's not that I didn't give you face. The main thing is that this small grotto heaven is too much. They sent people to kill me again and again. I really can't tolerate it. After a moment of silence, the supreme law said, what do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said, I'll work hard to become stronger. The supreme law looked at Yi Xian. Take care. After saying that, he was about to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior. The supreme law looked at Yi Xian. What's the matter? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Senior, I have a friend who is talented and intelligent. She has admired you for a long time and wants to learn the laws of the universe from you. I wonder if you are willing. The supreme law shook his head. I don't accept disciples. Yi Xian nodded slightly. All right. I can only let her learn from Qing. It's just that her foundation is a little weak now. It'll be a little slow to learn from Qing. If there's a transition. The supreme law suddenly said, can you convince your sister to accept a disciple? Yi Xian smiled. She's my sister. She definitely won't refuse if I ask. The supreme law was silent for a moment before saying, let her learn from me first. Yi Xian hurriedly said, really? The supreme law nodded. Actually, she also wanted to ask the plain-dressed lady some questions. However, the plain-dressed lady did not care about her at all. She finally realized something. That mysterious lady was only nice to Yi Xian. Other than Yi Xian, she would not give face to anyone else. If she accepted the person recommended by Yi Xian and Yi Xian recommended that person to the plain-dressed lady in the future, it would be very beneficial to her. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Senior, please wait a moment. With that, he turned around and disappeared. It didn't take long for him to appear once more, and Dao Yi was by his side. The supreme law took a glance at Dao Yi. Her? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. As he spoke, he tugged on Dao Yi's sleeve. Quickly acknowledge him as your master. Dao Yi hesitated for a moment before bowing slightly. Greetings, master. The supreme laws of nature nodded slightly. You'll follow me from now on. Yi Xian chuckled, all right. Then the three of us are a family from now on. The two girls looked at Yi Xian at the same time. Chapter 1803. A family? The supreme law looked at Yi Xian. How did we become a family? Yi Xian said with a straight face, Senior, you're Dao Yi's master, so you're my master too. As the saying goes, a master for a day, a father for life. We're definitely a family. The supreme law was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, can I ask you a question? The supreme law looked at Yi Xian. What is it? Yi Xian moved his mind, and a flying sword instantly slashed 10,000 feet away. A flying sword. Yi Xian said, Senior, what do you think of my flying sword? The supreme law said calmly, it's not good at all. Yi Xian was a little embarrassed. Is it not powerful at all? The Supreme Law nodded. It's very weak. Yi Xian's face darkened. The Supreme Law said calmly, do you think it's very powerful? Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. This should be okay. After all, it can even kill a great sage in an instant. The Supreme Law was expressionless. An ant-like existence like a great sage can be killed in an instant. Do you have a sense of superiority? Yi Xian said solemnly, Senior, a great sage is a top-notch expert in this ancient god star sector. The Supreme Law looked at Yi Xian. Those people I killed just now, do they think I'm very powerful? Yi Xian nodded. They worship you like a god. The Supreme Law said again, but in my eyes, your sister is even more terrifying. Yi Xian was speechless. The Supreme Law said softly, vision. Many times, strength limits vision. Because you're not strong enough, you can't see a bigger world and stronger people. If you're not strong enough, you won't understand how terrifying some circles are. Just like an ordinary person, he doesn't know that his entire life's work might not even be worth a meal from someone else. As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian. You think that your sword is very strong, but that's because the person you're facing now is very weak. What if you face me? Do you think this sword of yours is strong enough? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian nodded. I've learned something. The Supreme Law nodded slightly. Do you know why I asked you to spare the small grotto heaven? Yi Xian looked at the Supreme Law. It's not just because you're acquainted with the small grotto heaven's ancestor. The Supreme Laws of Nature shook its head. This is only one of the reasons. In fact, there's another reason. As she spoke, she paused for a moment before continuing, I know, weeds must be weeded out by the roots. However, with all due respect, is there any meaning to you fighting to the death with the little grotto heaven and the great spiritual god palace? Yi Xian was puzzled. What do you mean? The Supreme Laws of Nature looked at Yi Xian. A dragon will never go into a pond to fight for territory with a fish. Upon hearing that, Yi Xian understood. The Supreme Laws of Nature said again, you're too stubborn, and being too stubborn is easy to break. Just like this flying sword of yours, it's very fast, so fast that it doesn't belong to a speed that someone of your realm should have. However, is it really fast? Yi Xian bowed slightly. Senior, please guide me. The Supreme Laws of Nature said calmly, let's not discuss such low-level things. Upon hearing that, Yi Xian was stunned. Holy **T. This sounds familiar. Didn't Qing say that to me before? She's saying it to me now. This is revenge. Revenge. The Supreme Laws of Nature was about to leave with Dao Yi, but Yi Xian grabbed her arm. The Supreme Laws of Nature looked at Yi Xian. What are you trying to do? Yi Xian said seriously, Senior, please guide me. The Supreme Laws of Nature said calmly, is there any meaning in discussing such low-level things? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. There's a meaning. To me, there's a meaning. The Supreme Laws of Nature looked at Yi Xian. But there's no meaning to me. Yi Xian blinked. But you're my master. The Supreme Laws of Nature frowned slightly. When did I take you in as my disciple? Yi Xian pointed at Dao Yi. Is she your disciple? The Supreme Laws of Nature nodded. Yes. But what has that got to do with you? Yi Xian blurted out, I like Dao Yi. She's my woman. If she's your master, then she's my master too. After saying that, she felt a little regretful. Holy **T. I was too rash. He looked at Dao Yi, and Dao Yi was also looking at him. I'm your woman? Yi Xian nodded. At a time like this, he couldn't back down. Dao Yi smiled. When did this happen? Why didn't I know about it? Yi Xian said, I like you. Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. You like me, so I'm your woman? Yi Xian looked at Dao Yi. Do you hate me? Dao Yi thought about it and said, I don't hate you, but I didn't say that I like you, did I? Yi Xian said, when I said that I like you, it wasn't because I wanted to ask for advice from you, senior. I really like you. Dao Yi fell silent. Yi Xian walked to Dao Yi and grabbed Dao Yi's hand. Dao Yi didn't refuse. Yi Xian looked at Dao Yi. Would you let another man hold your hand like that? Dao Yi still didn't say anything. Yi Xian said again, I don't know when we'll meet again, but no matter when, as long as you need me, let me know. As long as I'm still alive, I'll be there. Take care. After saying that, he turned and left. Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian from afar and still didn't say anything. At this moment, the Supreme Law suddenly said, Be careful. Dao Yi looked at the Supreme Law. The Supreme Law said calmly, This guy is very cunning. And his skin is extraordinarily thick. Dao Yi, but, the Supreme Law said again, I can see that too. Although this guy is a little petty, even a little childish, he's the kind of person who will treat you well if you treat him well. And if you were to treat him badly, he would also return the favor, and he would do it to the extreme. And his feelings for you should be sincere. However, if you fall in love with him, you have to be careful. Dao Yi smiled faintly. Be careful of what? The Supreme Law looked at the distant horizon. 2 aspects. First, in terms of strength, you might not be able to catch up to him. Second, this guy is cunning, thick-skinned, and has strength. You might not be his last woman. Dao Yi smiled and said, He already has a few now. The Supreme Law looked at Dao Yi. What do you think? Dao Yi was silent for a moment before saying, I just want to learn the Tao of the universe's laws from Master. The Supreme Law nodded. Okay. Dao Yi suddenly said, Master, is there another reason why you don't guide him? The Supreme Law said, he needs to settle down for a while. Dao Yi nodded slightly. I understand. As if thinking of something, she said, Master, do you know about this god's graveyard? The Supreme Law nodded. Know about Dao Yi. Why, did he provoke this god's graveyard again? No, did this god's graveyard provoke him again? Dao Yi nodded. The Supreme Law sighed softly. Dao Yi said in a low voice, Is the god's graveyard very strong? The Supreme Law nodded. It's not something he can fight against now. Dao Yi was a little worried and wanted to say something but stopped. The Supreme Law smiled and said, Worried about him? Dao Yi nodded. The Supreme Law shook its head and sighed. Don't you think you should be worried about the god's graveyard? Dao Yi, the Supreme Law said again, It seems like you have really fallen in love with him. Silly girl. Dao Yi, the destruction of the small grotto heaven had shocked the universe. No one knew how the small heavenly abode was destroyed. Because everyone in the small grotto heaven that day, except for the heavenly demon nation king and Xiao Linlang, everyone else had been killed. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that Yi Xian was still alive. Yi Xian was alive. But the small grotto heaven was gone. One had to know that the small grotto heaven was backed by the Supreme Law. But now, the small grotto heaven was gone. But Yi Xian was still alive. Heavenly Demon Nation. On this day, a man came to the Heavenly Demon Nation. He wore simple clothes and had a sword wrapped in hemp rope on his waist. When the man came to the Heavenly Demon Nation, a middle-aged man stood in front of him. The middle-aged man was the Heavenly Demon Nation's crown prince. When he saw the small tombstone on the man's chest, his expression changed. The god's graveyard, the man nodded slightly. I am Lin Fan. I have come to ask your king. The middle-aged man hurriedly said, Please come in. Inside a big hall. The Heavenly Demon Nation king looked at Lin Fan in front of him. What do you want to ask? Lin Fan said, Not long ago, I felt the aura of an honorable. When I rushed to the small grotto heaven, there was no one there. But from what I know, you were there before that. The heavenly demon nation king was silent. Obviously, he was here to find out information. Lin Fan asked again, what happened? The heavenly demon nation king sighed. Yi Xian knows the honorable. Knows the honorable. Lin Fan frowned. Knows? The heavenly demon nation king nodded. Yes. After a moment of silence, Lin Fan turned and left. The heavenly demon nation king suddenly said, Sir, will the god's graveyard still target Yi Xian? Lin Fan shook his head and stopped. Just because he knows the honorable, he can do whatever he wants. The god's graveyard is not a small grotto heaven. We don't need the honorable's protection. If the honorable asks, the god's graveyard can give her face. But the honorable hasn't said anything. After saying this, he disappeared into the distance. Inside the hall, the heavenly demon nation king shook his head. What the hell? Didn't your people kill him first? You make it sound like he was the one who provoked you first. At this moment, the middle-aged man not far away said, Father, the god's graveyard knows that Yi Xian and the honorable are enemies, but they still target him. The heavenly demon nation king shook his head and sighed. It's a matter of face. Of course, the most important thing is that they have the strength and aren't afraid of the honorable. The middle-aged man said, Then isn't this Yi Xian very dangerous? The heavenly demon nation king said softly, I don't know if Yi Xian is dangerous or not. All I know is that they are big shots. We can't afford to offend them. The middle-aged man. On the other side, Yi Xian, who was riding on his sword, suddenly stopped. Not far away from him stood a middle-aged man and a woman in a green dress. He knew the woman in the green dress. She was from the building. And this middle-aged man was the building master of the building. The building master looked at Yi Xian and said, Young master Yi knows the honorable. Yi Xian asked, What's the matter? The building master was stunned and then said, Young master Yi, do you know how terrifying the god's graveyard is? You. A sword suddenly pressed against the building master's forehead. The building master's voice stopped abruptly. Yi Xian looked at the building master and said, Do the two of you complain about it every day? Oh. After saying this, he looked at the woman in the green dress and said, Sorry, I forgot. You don't have that egg. The woman in the green dress. P.S. Please vote. Please vote. Chapter 1804. Yi Xian sighed softly, You too, I have no enmity with the two of you, nor do I wish to hurt the two of you. However, can you not come looking for me and emphasize how scary the graveyard of the gods is? I know they're scary, but they were the ones who provoked me first, okay? If they want to kill me, I can't resist and can only let them kill me. The owner of the small building said solemnly, Young Master Yi, we have no ill intentions towards you. We just want to remind you. With a thought from Yi Xian, the sword between the eyebrows of the owner of the small building immediately disappeared. The owner of the small building heaved a sigh of relief. In that instant just now, he was truly terrified. He could not even take a single strike from Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly said, Previously, you told me that someone came to look for me in the graveyard of the gods. Who is it? The owner of the small building said, Previously, several major forces went to look for him, but he did not see anyone from the major forces. However, my people have seen him. He is a swordsman. And he is a very powerful swordsman. Swordsman. Yi Xian blinked, Swordsman? The owner of the small building nodded, He is the same as young Master Yi, a swordsman. Yi Xian smiled. What was he least afraid of? It was a swordsman. But very quickly, Yi Xian's smile disappeared. I can't be careless and underestimate the enemy. Not to mention people like Qing'er and his dad, even a swordsman like Yi is not someone he can resist. I can't be arrogant. I have to keep a low profile. At this moment, the owner of the small building continued, I wonder if I can ask young Master Yi a question? Yi Xian looked at the owner of the small building and said with a smile, "Ask away." The owner of the small building said solemnly, "Young Master Yi, do you know Jizun?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The expression of the small building's owner turned solemn. "Is it the familiar kind?" Yi Xian gave a half-smile. "What do you think?" Xiao Lu's landlord was dumbfounded. "Young Master Yi, don't tell me you have that kind of relationship with Jizun." Holy sh*t. Yi Xian was a little confused. What was this guy thinking? Seeing that Yi Xian didn't reply, the building master was certain in his heart. At the beginning, he was only guessing. The reason why he guessed that kind of relationship was because Yi Xian's smile was a little ambiguous. However, he did not expect that Yi Xian and Jizun really had that kind of relationship. This Jizun keeps a male pet? The building master didn't dare to think too much. Yi Xian did not explain much. He cupped his fists and said, "Your Excellency, farewell." With that, he turned around and left. This building was an intelligence department, and it would be of great help to him in the future. Since the other party was expressing goodwill, he naturally would not reject it. At this moment, the building master suddenly said, "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian turned around and looked at the building master. The building master said solemnly, "Young Master Yi, if you need anything in the future, just let me know." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course." The building master nodded. "Young Master Yi, take care." Yi Xian smiled, then turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Next to the building master, the woman in green dress suddenly said, "Landlord, do you think he can resist God's graveyard?" The building master said softly, "I have overlooked an important piece of information." The woman in green dress asked, "What is it?" The building master said solemnly, "If this young Master Yi is placed in God's graveyard, what rank do you think he would be among the younger generation?" The woman in green dress said, "He should also be favored by the heavens." The building master smiled slightly. "Before this, I felt that there were no forces in the universe that could compare to God's graveyard. However, does our building know all the forces in the universe?" The woman in green dress was silent for a moment, then said, "God's graveyard should already know that this young Master Yi knows a supreme. Will they still target him?" The building master nodded. "They will." The woman in green dress was puzzled. "Why?" The building master said, "Because of face. Of course, it's also because God's graveyard is not that afraid of supreme. You should know that there is more than one supreme in this universe." More than one supreme. The building master continued, "Let's wait and see." Soon, the two left. After parting ways with the owner of the small building, Yi Xian found a dead and silent starry sky and then entered the small tower. Naturally, he did not forget that Xiao Ta had a special ability. 10 years inside was equivalent to 1 day outside. Of course, he had to make good use of this heaven-defying ability. In the following time, Yi Xian began to study the way of spacetime. Actually, he could reach the mortal severing realm or even the spacetime realm now. However, he still did not choose to break through. His goal had never changed, and that was to reach the heaven ascension realm without limit. He wanted to reach it without limit. The world inside Xiao Ta was very big. While Yi Xian was cultivating, Xiao Ta would bring Xiaoan, the sword mausoleum, and Xiao Ling, to play all day long. Xiaoan sat by a lake, her hand supporting her chin as if she was thinking about something. At this moment, Xiao Ling, walked in front of Xiaoan, took out a spirit fruit and handed it to Xiaoan. "Eat." Xiaoan looked at Xiao Ling. On Xiao Ling's shoulder, there was a little guy. It was the divine level spirit vein. Xiao Ling sat beside Xiaoan, looking at the lake in the distance. "Xiaoan, you seem a little unhappy." Xiaoan shook her head slightly. "No." After saying that, she looked down at the palm of her right hand. In her palm, the black lotus imprint would squirm from time to time, as if it was about to come to life. She was very scared. She wanted to tell Yi Xian, but she did not dare. Because this lotus imprint almost burned Yi Xian last time. She was very worried. At this moment, Xiao Ling giggled and grabbed Xiao An's right hand, then let's go play together. The moment her hand was grabbed by Xiao Ling, Xiao An's expression changed drastically. She was about to pull her hand back, but she soon found that the black lotus imprint did not react at all. Xiao An was a little confused. Why did Xiao Ling have no problem grabbing her hand? While she was puzzled, Xiao Ling had already pulled her away. Time passed little by little. It had to be said that when it came to cultivation, time passed too quickly. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. On the other side, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the top of a mountain. At this moment, he was surrounded by nearly 80 time-dimensional rivers. It had to be said that this was really tiring, because each time he condensed a time-dimensional river, it would consume a lot of energy. However, Yi Xian was getting more and more excited. Limitless. He wanted to achieve limitless. As long as he could achieve limitless, his sword of time and space would also be limitless. Limitless sword of time and space meant limitless flying swords. If he could really achieve limitless, the current realm would no longer be meaningful to him. Of course, he still had to go through this process. Many things sounded simple, but he still had to go through them personally. It was just like how everyone knew that it would hurt to be cut by a knife, but if he did not cut himself, he would never know what that pain felt like. In addition to studying the Tao of time and space, he also studied his flying swords and drawing the sword to determine life and death. In the following time, Yi Xian immersed himself in cultivation. On this day, a swordsman came to the small building. This person was Lin Fan. When Lin Fan arrived at the small building, the building owner came out to welcome him. The building owner cupped his fists, "Your Excellency." He did not dare to offend Yi Xian, nor did he dare to offend the god's graveyard. Lin Fan nodded slightly. "Help me." The building owner said, "Please speak." Lin Fan looked at the building owner. "I want to know the whereabouts of that Yi Xian." Yi Xian's whereabouts. The building owner's face instantly turned serious. "Your Excellency wants to kill him?" Lin Fan nodded. The building owner was a little hesitant. Lin Fan looked at the building owner. "Not willing?" The building owner smiled bitterly. "It's not that I'm not willing, but we also don't know where young Master Yi is. For an expert of his level, if he wants to hide, it will be hard for outsiders to find him." Lin Fan nodded slightly. "Sorry for disturbing." With that, he turned and left. Behind him, the building owner said softly, "If this young Master Yi goes to the god's graveyard to slaughter, it will be fun." Saying that, he shook his head and smiled. "How is that possible, god's graveyard? That god's graveyard is not a small grotto heaven." Not long after Lin Fan left the building, a woman suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Great Spiritual God Palace's Chao Xiu. Chao Xiu looked at Lin Fan. "You want to find the Yi Xian?" Lin Fan nodded. "You know where he is?" Chao Xiu shook her head. "I don't know where he is, but I know someone who can contact him." Lin Fan said, "Who?" Chao Xiu said, "Follow me." With that, she turned and left. Lin Fan also followed. Soon, both of them arrived at Great Spiritual God Palace's Lingxiu Peak. Chao Xiu brought Lin Fan directly to Li Shuran. Chao Xiu looked at Li Shuran. "Contact Yi Xian." Li Shuran hesitated, then said, "Peak leader Chao Xiu, I can't contact Brother Yi." Chao Xiu stared at Li Shuran. "As long as you contact him, I will let you be a direct disciple." Li Shuran shook his head. "I can't contact him." Chao Xiu squinted her eyes. "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." With that, she pressed her right hand down lightly. Boom! Li Shuran directly knelt on the ground, his knees instantly shattered. Li Shuran clenched his fists. He glanced at the small grave on Lin Fan's left chest, then looked at Chao Xiu. "I can't contact him." Obviously, he had already recognized Lin Fan's identity. The people from the graveyard of gods were looking for Yi Xian. Brother Yi was in danger. Chao Xiu looked at Li Shuran. "Looks like you want to die." With that, she pressed her right hand down lightly. Gotcha. In an instant, all the bones in Li Shuran's body shattered. Li Shuran's eyes widened, his entire face contorted, but he kept staring at Qiao Xiu. I can't contact him. He could actually contact Yi Xian, but he knew that if he contacted Yi Xian, then the people from the graveyard of gods would definitely be able to find Yi Xian. At that time, Yi Xian would be in danger. Yi Xian treated him like a brother, why would he betray his brother? Qiao Xiu stared at Li Shuran, her right hand slowly pressing down. Gotcha. Gotcha. Not only were all the bones in Li Shuran's body shattering, even his flesh was cracking bit by bit. Li Shuran laughed sinisterly. Kill me. You killed me. Qiao Xiu shook her head. Want to die? Your thinking is too simple. If you don't contact Yi Xian, I'll make you wish you were dead. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her lily-white hand lightly. In an instant, pieces of Li Shuran's flesh flew out, death by 1,000 cuts. Li Shuran laughed out loud. That's it? Is that all? Qiao Xiu looked at Li Shuran. You've only known him for less than a month, and he's not related to you at all. Is it worth it to destroy your body and soul for him? Li Shuran slowly closed his eyes. He's 100 times stronger than me, Li Shuran, but he treats me like a brother. I, Li Shuran, may not be a genius, but I, Li Shuran, will never betray my brother. I can't make it. Chapter 1805. Qiao Xiu glared at Li Shuran in front of her. Since you have such backbone, then I'll fulfill your wish. As she spoke, she was about to attack. However, an old man suddenly appeared here. The person who came was one of the 6 peak masters, Yu Wan. Ever since Chen Jiang died, he was now the palace lord of the great spiritual god palace. Yu Wan said in a low voice, Junior apprentice sister, you've gone too far. Qiao Xiu snarled, what do you mean by too much? This person is a disciple of my great spiritual god palace, but he is helping an outsider. Shouldn't they be killed? Yu Wan took a glance at Li Shuran before saying, Junior sister, there's no point in targeting him. Qiao Xiu said angrily, I'm not targeting him, but he knows where Yi Xian is. Yu Wan frowned. Why can't you let go of your hatred? Qiao Xiu glared at Yu Wan. The one who died wasn't senior brother's disciple, of course senior brother can let go of his hatred. Yu Wan sighed softly and was about to speak when Lin Fan suddenly said, I only need to know Yi Xian's whereabouts. If he's willing to tell me Yi Xian's whereabouts, then I won't make things difficult for him. Similarly, our god's graveyard will not make things difficult for the great spiritual god palace. The graveyard of the gods. Yu Wan's expression turned grave and he couldn't help but glance at Qiao Xiu. He sighed again in his heart. He was even a little angry. Actually, what he meant was that the great spiritual god palace should not interfere in the matter between the tomb of the gods and Yi Xian. Because the great spiritual god palace could not afford to offend either side. And now, Qiao Xiu had contacted the tomb of the gods. If the tomb of the gods really managed to get rid of Yi Xian, that would be fine. But what if they couldn't? What would happen to the great spiritual god palace then? If he expelled Qiao Xiu from the great spiritual god palace now, it would be equivalent to slapping the tomb of the gods in the face. The great spiritual god palace was caught in a dilemma. Qiao Xiu suddenly said again, Senior brother, eldest senior brother's death is absolutely related to that Yi Xian. The great spiritual divine palace has no enmity with the great spiritual divine palace, so it is impossible for him to kill eldest senior brother. There is only one explanation, and that is that Yi Xian instigated the great spiritual divine palace to kill eldest senior brother. How can my great spiritual god palace not take revenge? Yu Wan was silent. Qiao Xiu continued, now that the graveyard of the gods has personally come forward, what are you still worried about? Lin Fan looked at Yu Wan, is there a problem? His tone was somewhat displeased. Yu Wan was shocked as he hurriedly replied, of course not. As he spoke, he looked at Li Shuran. If you can contact the Yi Xian, tell us. As long as you tell us, our great spiritual God palace will not make things difficult for you. Not only that, I can also promote you to a true disciple. Coercion and bribery. At this moment, the lower half of Li Shiran's body had already been sliced into countless pieces, but he didn't make a single sound. Li Shiran clenched his fists tightly, his entire body trembling. I don't know. I just don't know. Hearing that, Yuan frowned slightly. Why are you doing this? Chao Xiu suddenly said, it's fine if he doesn't tell me. I naturally have a way. As she spoke, she walked in front of Li Shiran and slapped his shoulder with her right hand. Boom! Li Shiran's entire body directly turned into powder, leaving only his soul. Chao Xiu placed her right hand on Li Shiran's soul and in an instant, Li Shiran's soul directly ignited. Soul ignition. Li Shiran's eyes opened wide as his entire face twisted. Unbearable pain. At this moment, he only had one thought, and that was to die. Chao Xiu was extracting his memories. Not only was she extracting his memories, but she was also burning his soul. Actually, Chao Xiu could only extract his memories and didn't need to burn his soul. But Chao Xiu obviously wanted to torture him to death. It was very painful. But Li Shiran didn't even make a sound. After a moment, Chao Xiu smiled sinisterly. You're very loyal, then I'll fulfill your brotherhood. As her voice faded, she retracted her hand. Boom! Li Shiran's soul directly ignited. Chao Xiu smiled even more sinisterly. Don't worry, I'll get the Yi Xian to accompany you very soon. As she spoke, she turned to look at Lin Fan. I can contact Yi Xian now. Are you confident in killing him? Lin Fan nodded. As long as Jizun doesn't appear, I have a 90% chance of killing him. As he spoke, he suddenly pressed his right hand lightly towards Li Shiran and the flames on Li Shiran's body immediately disappeared. Lin Fan said, if I kill him now, that Yi Xian probably won't come. Leave him with one breath and let the Yi Xian come. Chao Xiu nodded, you're still the most thoughtful one. As she spoke, she took out a voice transmission talisman and crushed it. Chao Xiu looked at the end of the horizon, her expression gradually becoming sinister. Yi Xian, it's time to pay with blood. Inside Xiao Ta. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly frowned. He directly left Xiao Ta behind him. There were hundreds of time-dimensional rivers. It hasn't even been a day in the outside world, but inside Xiao Ta, several years have passed. When Yi Xian left Xiao Ta, the space in front of him suddenly trembled. Then, Chao Xiu's voice came from the trembling space. A moment later, Yi Xian slightly narrowed his eyes and in the next moment, he directly disappeared from the spot. Great Spiritual God Palace, Lingxiu Peak. Chao Xiu retracted her gaze and a sword light fell straight in front of her. Chao Xiu was shocked, so fast. Seeing Yi Xian, Yuan's expression instantly became solemn. Towards Yi Xian, he naturally didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. This was a person who could destroy a small cave. Lin Fan was also sizing up Yi Xian, his left hand already on the hilt of his sword. Yi Xian walked in front of Li Shiran. When he saw Yi Xian's almost transparent soul, he slowly closed his eyes. Li Shiran smiled slightly. Brother Yi, Yi Xian said softly, sorry. I've implicated you. Li Shiran shook his head. I've implicated Brother Yi. Yi Xian suddenly turned to look at Chao Xiu. If you want to target me, just come to me directly. Why do you have to target him? He's a disciple of Great Spiritual God Palace. What wrong did he do? Why are you treating him like this? Chao Xiu sneered. What wrong? He knows you, that's a mistake. Yi Xian slightly narrowed his eyes. From today onwards, there will be no Great Spiritual God Palace in this world. Chao Xiu said mockingly, with just you? You. Chi. Before Chao Xiu could finish speaking, her forehead was directly pierced by a sword. Seeing this scene, Yuan's expression instantly changed. He said in horror, you. He was already speechless. Chao Xiu was about to reach Great Saint. Yet she was insta-killed by Yi Xian just like that? At the side, Lin Fan also had a trace of disbelief in his eyes. Why is your sword so fast? Yi Xian looked at Lin Fan. You're from God's graveyard? Lin Fan looked at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian turned to look at Chao Xiu and said with a smile, so he's the reason why you're so arrogant. As he spoke, he willed it in his heart. Chi. A ray of sword light flashed through the battlefield. The moment Yi Xian used his flying sword, Lin Fan's expression instantly changed, and he suddenly drew his sword and slashed forward. Although he had drawn his sword in a moment of desperation, it was still as fast as lightning. Boom! A ray of sword light shattered, and Lin Fan's body directly stiffened on the spot. It wasn't Yi Xian's sword light that shattered, but his own. Although he drew his sword very quickly, Yi Xian's flying sword was even faster. A sword of qi pierced through Lin Fan's forehead. An instant kill. Chao Xiu's face was filled with disbelief when she saw this scene. Yi Xian looked at Chao Xiu. Do you still have something to rely on? Fear appeared in Chao Xiu's eyes. How can you be so strong? This is absolutely impossible. This can't be real. At this moment, she had already broken down. This expert from God's graveyard was actually insta-killed by Yi Xian's sword. This was someone from God's graveyard. Gone just like that? Didn't they say they would get rid of Yi Xian? Lin Fan also looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. Why is your sword so fast? Yi Xian glanced at Lin Fan. You want to know? Lin Fan nodded subconsciously. Yi Xian smiled. I'm not telling you. Lin Fan, at this moment, Yuan suddenly said in a trembling voice, Young Master Yi, my great spiritual god palace. Yi Xian suddenly turned and slashed. Qi. A sword directly pierced through Yuan's forehead. Yi Xian looked at Yuan. Did I give you permission to speak? Yuan. Yi Xian walked in front of Li Xiuran. Li Xiuran smiled bitterly. Brother Yi, if I knew you were so strong, I would have contacted you. Sigh. He was indeed a little aggrieved. Damn it. If I knew this guy was so strong, I wouldn't have needed to use the hammer. He had suffered for nothing. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He took out the green profound sword and said, Little soul, protect Brother Li's soul. The green profound sword directly absorbed Li Xiuran's soul. Soul nurturing. With the help of the green profound sword, Li Xiuran's soul that was about to completely disappear was directly stabilized. And Yi Xian also heaved a sigh of relief. Yi Xian turned to look at Yuan. The latter said in a low voice, Yi Xian, this matter is my senior and junior sister's fault. Don't implicate the entire great spiritual god palace. Yi Xian suddenly said, I said it. From today onwards, the great spiritual god palace is no more. As he spoke, countless flying swords suddenly slashed towards the depths of the great spiritual god palace with a thought. Hiss. 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 In an instant, countless shrill cries resounded throughout the entire great spiritual god palace. Yuan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Yi Xian, do you really want to go to such extremes? Yi Xian glanced coldly at Yuan, then looked at Chao Xiu. It was because I didn't go to such extremes that I almost caused Brother Li's death. So, from today onwards, I will kill anyone who is an enemy of Yi Xian and not leave any future troubles. As he spoke, over a dozen flying swords slashed out with a thought. In an instant, over a dozen bloody heads soared into the sky from the depths of the great spiritual god palace. In the distance, Chao Xiu was horrified. She looked at Lin Fan and roared furiously, Aren't you from the tomb of the gods? Go get him. Come on, you. Lin Fan went silent for a moment before he said, Can't you see that there's a sword in my head? Yuan. P.S. Honestly, what do you guys think when you see me shamelessly begging for votes every day? Chapter 1806. In fact, Lin Fan was also shocked. He was a Descent Realm swordsman. Not only that, but he was also a genuine great sage. As long as he didn't encounter an ancient god realm expert, he was practically invincible. However, he was instantly killed by Yi Xian. And Yi Xian was only in the Heaven Ascension realm. This was too much. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Lin Fan. You came to the tomb of the gods to kill me? Lin Fan looked at Yi Xian. Who the hell are you? Yi Xian smiled. My name is Yi Xian. As he spoke, a sword sank into Lin Fan's body. The Azure Profound Sword. The Azure Profound Sword madly absorbed Lin Fan's soul. Lin Fan suddenly opened his palm. In his hand, a red talisman directly turned into a faint light and disappeared into the horizon. Taking a look at the sky, Yi Xian said with a smile, Are you calling for help? Lin Fan stared at Yi Xian. You will pay the price. Yi Xian smiled, Perhaps. But you won't be able to see it. As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve. Boom! The Azure Profound Sword completely absorbed Lin Fan. Seeing Yi Xian kill Lin Fan, Yuan's face instantly paled. Grand Spiritual God Palace is finished. Completely finished. Yi Xian dared to kill people from the Tomb of the Gods, what more their Grand Spiritual God Palace? As if remembering something, Yuan suddenly turned to Cao Xiao and roared, Do you see what you did? Do you see it? Cao Xiao's face was ashen. At this moment, she was also afraid. Even an expert of Lin Fan's level was killed by Yi Xian with a single strike. Just how strong was Yi Xian? At this time, Yi Xian turned and walked towards the Grand Spiritual God Palace. At this time, an old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was the young martial uncle. Little martial uncle looked at Yi Xian. Can you spare my Great Spiritual God Palace? Yi Xian smiled. When she was targeting Li Shiran, why didn't you ask her to spare his life? Little martial uncle said solemnly, We were wrong. Yi Xian shook his head. I don't need your apologies. Little Uncle Master suddenly said, The one at fault is Cao Xiao. How can the rest of the Great Spiritual Palace be innocent? Yi Xian looked straight at Little Martial Uncle. You wanted to kill me, what wrong did Li Shiran do? Why did you target him? Little Martial Uncle shook his head, Young Master Yi, we are the ones in the wrong. We have nothing to do with the rest of the people from Great Spiritual God Palace. If we die, can you let them go? Yi Xian looked straight at his junior uncle. No. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared here. It was the outer court elder, Gu Qing. Gu Qing bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, Just call me Yi Xian. Gu Qing smiled bitterly. He wanted to plead for mercy but didn't dare to. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before saying, I'll give you face. But. With that, he willed in his mind. Qi. The Azure Profound Sword entered Cao Xiao's body and started to absorb her soul. Cao Xiao stared at Yi Xian with eyes full of hatred. Yi Xian, you will end up worse than me in the future. Yi Xian smiled, Maybe. But I can see your end, but you won't be able to see mine. Cao Xiao wanted to say something but Yi Xian flicked his sleeve. Boom. Cao Xiao's soul was completely absorbed. Yi Xian turned to look at the palace lord of the Great Spiritual God Palace, Yuan. The latter still wanted to say something, but the Qingxian sword had already sunk into his glabella. Bang! Yuan was instantly absorbed. After he killed Yuan, Yi Xian looked at the junior uncle. That little martial uncle. Little martial uncle was silent. Yi Xian pointed at Gu Qing. From this moment onward, he's the palace master of Great Spiritual Palace. Do you have a problem with that? Gu Qing's expression changed drastically when he heard this, and he hurriedly said, How can I be the palace master? Yi Xian gazed at Gu Qing. If you become the palace master, then I'll give you face. If it's anyone else, then I won't give it any face. Gu Qing spoke bitterly, I'm not strong enough. No one in Great Spiritual Palace will submit to me. Meanwhile, the junior martial uncle spoke abruptly, submit. My entire great spiritual palace will submit to you. Yi Xian glanced at the junior martial uncle, and then he withdrew his thumb that was resting on the hilt of his sword. The junior martial uncle gazed at Gu Qing. I'll kill anyone who refuses to submit. Gu Qing hesitated for a moment before he nodded. He knew that if he didn't become the palace master, then great spiritual palace would really be destroyed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly, Elder Gu Qing, remember to contact me at any time if you have any problems. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Elder Gu Qing turned around to look at the junior martial uncle, and the junior martial uncle spoke softly, he's actually become so strong. Even though Yi Xian was strong all those years ago, he wasn't so monstrous. But the current Yi Xian wasn't just strong. He was simply a freak. He was too terrifying. Besides ancient god realm experts, no one could stop Yi Xian any longer. Gu Qing had quite a complicated feeling in his heart. He hadn't expected that an outer court disciple he'd casually recruited would actually be so terrifying. After Yi Xian left Great Spiritual Palace, he found a place to reconstruct Li Xiran's physical body. With the help of the Azure Profound Sword, it wasn't a difficult task. 3 days later. Somewhere by a lake, Li Xiran sat cross-legged in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, his aura was even stronger than before. Because his soul had been strengthened by the Azure Profound Sword. Around an hour later, Li Xiran stood up and looked at Yi Xian, Brother Yi, thank you. Yi Xian smiled, do you still want to return to Great Spiritual Palace? Li Xiran hesitated for a moment and said, I want to. Yi Xian nodded, sure. Now that Elder Gu Qing is the palace master of Great Spiritual Palace, if you return, you'll be able to help him a lot. Li Xiran smiled, Brother Yi, if I may be so bold as to ask, how strong are you now? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, under 3 swords, I'm invincible. Above 3 swords, 1 for 1. As soon as he finished speaking, he instantly regretted it. Meanwhile, Xiao Ta spoke abruptly, young master, I won't say anything when you say you're invincible under 3 swords, but your 1 for 1 above 3 swords is too much. Too much. Yi Xian, at the side, Li Xiran was suddenly curious, Brother Yi, who are these 3 swords? Yi Xian blinked, and then he smiled, my younger sister, my father, and my big brother. Li Xiran, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Brother Li, go back to the Great Spiritual Divine Palace. I'm going to be busy. Li Xiran nodded, Brother Yi, take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. After Li Xiran left, Yi Xian turned around and left as well. He went directly to the pavilion, and as soon as he arrived, the pavilion master came out to welcome him. The pavilion master cupped his fists, young Master Yi. He was already aware of what happened at Great Spiritual Palace. Yi Xian killed Lin Fan from God's graveyard. And it was an instant kill. Needless to say, when he heard this news, he was completely dumbfounded. Lin Fan was a great sage-level swordsman. Yi Xian smiled, Pavilion Master, I don't come without a reason. This time, I'm here to ask you about something. The Pavilion Master said, young Master Yi. Please speak. Yi Xian said, where is God's graveyard? Hearing this, Xiao Lu's face was full of shock, young Master Yi, you. Yi Xian smiled and did not say anything. After a moment of silence, Xiao Lu took out a scroll and handed it to Yi Xian. The entrance to God's graveyard is on this scroll. Yi Xian put away the scroll, then took out a storage ring and handed it to Xiao Lu, thank you. The pavilion master glanced at the storage ring and hurriedly shook his head, there's no need for that. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, help me pay attention to the movements of the various powers, especially the God's graveyard. He didn't want something like Li Xiran to happen again. The pavilion master smiled, that's no problem. Yi Xian put away the storage ring, then I owe you a favor. The pavilion master was delighted. This was his objective, and that was to make Yi Xian owe him a favor. A favor was much more valuable than an eternal divine crystal. Yi Xian didn't say anything else, and he just cupped his fists. Farewell. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. The pavilion master looked up into the horizon and said softly, "Is he going to the god's graveyard?" The god's graveyard. The pavilion master couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly when he thought of this. This was truly too absurd. Yi Xian flew on his sword, and he arrived at the entrance of God's graveyard in less than 2 hours. The God's eye was located in a separate world, and their entrance was in a starry sky. Yi Xian stood before an enormous white hole, and the God's graveyard was just past this hole. However, he didn't go in. He didn't know much about God's graveyard, so he would probably be ganged up on and beaten to death if he went in rashly. Right at this moment, the white hole suddenly trembled, and then an old man walked out from within it in next to no time. A great sage. Yi Xian glanced at the old man, and the old man noticed him as well. The old man frowned when he saw Yi Xian. "Who are you?" Yi Xian blinked. "Are you going to look for that Yi Xian?" The old man gazed at Yi Xian. "How do you know?" Yi Xian said seriously, "I know where Yi Xian is." The old man sized up Yi Xian, and a hint of wariness appeared in his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" Yi Xian was about to speak when the old man suddenly said, "You're that Yi Xian." Yi Xian was stunned. The old man stared at Yi Xian. "You killed Lin Fan." Yi Xian was about to speak when the old man turned and ran. The old man was very fast, and he entered the hole in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression darkened. Damn it. The people of God's graveyard weren't so easy to fool. It would be very difficult for him to survive. At this moment, Sword Mausoleum's voice suddenly sounded, "Young master, I've been here before." Yi Xian was stunned, and then asked, "You and your master?" Sword Mausoleum nodded, "Yes. Master has been inside before." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Is she very powerful inside?" Sword Mausoleum immediately said, "Of course. Master is very powerful no matter where she goes. However, Master seemed to have lost one move when he fought with someone in there." Yi Xian turned to look at the hole. He had been here before. And she had lost. Damn it. Wasn't it a little boastful to say that he wanted to destroy God's graveyard? At this moment, Sword Mausoleum suddenly said, "Young master, you're not afraid, are you?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he laughed. "Can a small God's graveyard take one of my swords?" Sword Mausoleum said, "Then you go in, young master." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1807. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't move, Sword Mausoleum said again, "Young master, are you really afraid?" Yi Xian said seriously, "I won't kill today. Spare their lives." After saying that, he turned around and left. Sword Mausoleum was speechless. Not long after Yi Xian left, an old man slowly walked out of the white star hole. As soon as the old man came out, the surrounding starry sky trembled slightly as if it had fallen a little. The old man wore a loose black robe and held a walking stick in his hand. He seemed to be carrying a heavy load on his back. He walked very slowly and seemed to have no strength left in him. The old man glanced around and frowned slightly. "Where is he?" At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from beside the old man. "Apotheon Mu, Yi Xian has left." "Left?" Apotheon Mu nodded slightly. "I'm too late." As he spoke, he glanced at the end of the Star River in the distance. "I never expected that there would be such a genius in the outside world. He's not simple." The voice sounded again. "This person killed 2 people of my god's graveyard in a row. He can't be left alive." At this moment, some strange runes suddenly appeared in the space around Apotheon Mu. As these strange runes appeared, some flames actually appeared on the old man's body. Apotheon Mu frowned slightly. He thought for a moment and said, I can't stay outside for too long. Find a way to let him enter my god's graveyard. Or lure him here." After saying that, he turned around and left. As soon as he entered the white star hole, the strange red runes around him suddenly disappeared. Restrictions. The supreme laws of nature had restricted many top-notch experts in this universe. After the old man left, the scene quickly returned to calm. After Yi Xian left the entrance of the god's graveyard, he returned to Azure Prefecture. In fact, he wasn't a killer. As long as the god's graveyard didn't come looking for trouble with him, he couldn't be bothered to look for them. Wasn't it nice to cultivate every day and then accompany his lovely wife? In the palace, Yi Xian sat on the dragon throne with Tuoba Yen in his arms. Tuoba Yen said softly, "I don't think I'm pregnant." Yi Xian blinked. "Then let's continue working hard." Tuoba Yen rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. "Idiot." Yi Xian laughed and wrapped his arms around Tuoba Yan's waist. Tuoba Yen looked up at Yi Xian and said seriously, "I feel that something is not right." Yi Xian asked, "What's not normal?" Tuoba Yen said solemnly, "Logically speaking, should be pregnant." But hearing this, Yi Xian frowned. "What do you mean?" Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian. "How many children does your father have?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "2. I think I have an older sister." Nian Shua. Thinking of this, he missed Sister Shua again. Unfortunately, he didn't know where she had gone to have fun. Tuoba Yen continued, "Then your father." Yi Xian suddenly interrupted Tuoba Yan's words. "What do you mean my father?" "It's our father." Tuoba Yen blinked, a trace of warmth flowed in his heart. Yi Xian held Tuoba Yan's hand and said softly, "You mean, the problem lies with me?" Tuoba Yen nodded. "It's very likely. Because of your bloodline. Bloodline power." Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly understood. His bloodline power was very special. Could it be that his mother could give birth to him because of the immortal bloodline? Thinking of this, Yi Xian's face darkened. Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Shrine. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as the heir is removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his lips. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed slightly to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, "First elder, my brother Yi Xian is the heir. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The first elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the first elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral shrine. She once again bowed to the elders on both sides. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the mining rights. He is fighting for the clan with his life on the line. His fate is unknown. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent." The first elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away from me." At this time, the new heir, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The first elder coldly replied, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said with some anger, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new heir, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of heir, it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry, she just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Jianghu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, "You're not bad. After I become the heir, I need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Jianghu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the heir. I'm willing to die 1,000 deaths." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand?" Jianghu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Jianghu didn't know what he saw, but he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe, which was torn and tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Jianghu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Jianghu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Jianghu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Ling did not stop there, and he rushed towards Jianghu again. At this time, Yi Lang in the ancestral hall suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Jianghu's chest. Pooh! Jianghu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Jianghu's face. Jianghu's entire face was a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Jianghu, who was crying for help. He walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Jianghu and kicked Jianghu's head. Pung! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, "Great Elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yiling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate, Jianghu, greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Jianghu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Jianghu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Jianghu seemed to see something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Jianghu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Jianghu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Jianghu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Jianghu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Jianghu's chest. Pooh! Jianghu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Jianghu's face. Jianghu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Jianghu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Jianghu, and kicked Jianghu's head. Pung! Chapter 1808. After parting ways with Mu Xiaodao and the other girls, Yi Xian returned to Azure Province once more. With the Azure Profound Sword, the entire universe was a little small to him. He could go wherever he wanted. In front of the palace, Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian. "You're leaving again?" Yi Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, Tuoba Yen said, "Take care." Yi Xian smiled. "You too." With that said, he hugged Tuoba Yen gently and placed his hands on Tuoba Yen's lower abdomen. "Don't worry too much about the child. I'll come back more often in the future. We just have to work hard." Tuoba Yen rolled his eyes at Yi Xian, his cheeks slightly red. Yi Xian kissed Tuoba Yan's bright red lips and said with a smile, "Wait for me to come back. We'll continue to have children." With that said, he turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Tuoba Yen looked up at the horizon, his gaze gradually becoming infatuated. Even though they were not together every day, their feelings grew stronger. In the starry sky, Yi Xian traveled on his sword. He closed his eyes slightly. During this period of time, he had met many of his good friends and was deeply moved. The world ahead was very exciting, but he must not forget the path he had taken. Many people should not have disappeared from his life just like that. Especially those who had helped him in the past. He should not forget a single one of them. His heart. At this moment, Yi Xian finally understood one thing. It was actually very difficult to not forget one's heart. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly asked in puzzlement, "Xiao Ta, I've comprehended so much this time, but why haven't I broken through in my sword Dao? Is there a problem somewhere?" Xiao Ta said, "Young lord, maybe there's something wrong with your brain." Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Xiao Ta sighed softly. "Young lord, you only have a little bit of life comprehension. Moreover, it has nothing to do with your sword Dao. Did you fart and comprehend something, and your sword Dao will also improve?" Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta continued, "However, there shouldn't be any disadvantages. Because you've realized your own problem." Yi Xian blinked, a little puzzled. "What's wrong with me?" Xiao Ta asked in return, "Didn't you realize that you've been a little arrogant lately and want to settle down?" Yi Xian frowned. "Am I getting carried away?" Xiao Ta was silent for a long time before he said, "Are you kidding me? Is it fun to tease a tower?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Xiao Ta, do you think I'm arrogant?" Xiao Ta said angrily, "Below the three swords, you are invincible. Above the three swords, 1-for-1, were you the one who said that?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Xiao Ta said, "Don't tell me your words are not arrogant. Tell me, among the three swords, who can you exchange for?" Yi Xian said, "Is bragging against the law?" Xiao Ta was stunned. Yi Xian said, "Since it's not against the law, what's wrong with me bragging a little?" "Why?" Xiao Ta was silent for a long time before he said, "You're much more awesome than master. In terms of shamelessness and shamelessness, you've really surpassed your master." Yi Xian laughed. "Xiao Ta, I've said before that the most important thing in this world is the skin of one's face. The same skin of one's face, but a different life. Those who laugh on the outside, cry on the inside. Those who laugh on the inside, cry on the outside. The skin of one's face is the most unreliable thing in the world. What's the use of it?" Xiao Ta was speechless. Yi Xian smiled. "It's just like finding a wife in the secular world. A shameless person will never lack a wife." Xiao Ta sighed softly. "Young master, I'm a little worried." Yi Xian didn't understand. "Worried about what?" Xiao Ta said, "Master is already very shameless. As for you, you've surpassed your master. It's not that you're shameless, it's that you don't have any. Now, I'm a little worried about your future children. In the future, This little one will inherit this shameless fine tradition of you too. How scary will that be? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta was about to speak when the space in front of Yi Xian trembled slightly. In the next moment, a man walked out. It was the building lord. The building lord said in a low voice, "Young Master Yi, the graveyard of gods wants to lure and kill you." Yi Xian frowned. Lure and kill me? The building lord nodded. The ancient gods in the graveyard of gods can't come out. Thus, they want to lure you into the graveyard of gods and kill you. They. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Their ancient gods can't come out?" The building lord nodded. Yes. They're restricted by the supreme laws. The corners of Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. So, ancient gods can't come out. The building lord continued, "Thus, they want to lure you into the graveyard of gods and kill you." Yi Xian said, "They definitely want to target the people around me." The building lord nodded. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly said, "I only know Li Shiran and Elder Gu Qing from the great spiritual god palace." With that, he disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, Yi Xian was already in the great spiritual god palace. Just as he arrived above the great spiritual god palace, an old man appeared in front of him. The old man looked at Yi Xian and said, "I've been waiting for you." Yi Xian smiled. The graveyard of gods. The old man nodded. "I want to invite you to the graveyard of gods as a guest. Your two friends are there as well. If you go, they'll return." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "What's your status in the graveyard of gods?" The old man frowned. "What do you mean?" Yi Xian moved his mind. Swish. A flying sword pierced through the old man's forehead. It didn't kill him directly, but only locked onto his soul. Not only that, but Yi Xian turned around and waved his sleeve. Swish. Swish. Four flying swords suddenly flew out. Not far in front of him, the space around him suddenly exploded. Then, 4 men in black appeared in front of Yi Xian. Before these 4 people could react, the 4 flying swords had already sunk into the space between their eyebrows, subduing 5 people in an instant. Yi Xian looked at the old man in front of him and said with a smile, "Now, inform the people in the graveyard of gods to release my friends within an hour. Otherwise, I'll use the lives of 4 of you to exchange for the lives of 2 of them. 2 for 4, I think it's worth it." The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, his heart was filled with extreme astonishment. He was at the peak of the great saint realm. Yet now, he actually couldn't even block a single attack from Yi Xian. The strength of this young man before him was truly too terrifying. "I've miscalculated." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Do you have any other questions?" The old man gazed at Yi Xian. "Do you dare to go to the graveyard of gods?" Yi Xian smiled, and then he flicked his sleeve. Bang! The old man's body exploded into pieces, and only his soul remained. However, the flying sword that was stuck in his soul was still there and hadn't vanished. Yi Xian gazed at the old man and said with a smile, "Inform the graveyard of gods to release them. Otherwise, I'll make the 5 of you vanish from this world immediately. You can give it a try and see if I dare." The old man fell silent for a moment, and then he opened his palm. A transmission talisman suddenly shot into the sky from his palm. A short moment later, the space above Yi Xian suddenly trembled, and then an illusory middle-aged man appeared above them. An ancient god realm expert. However, it wasn't his true body, but an illusory image. The old man and the others hurriedly bowed when they saw the middle-aged man. "Greetings, revered you." In the sky, revered you looked down at Yi Xian, but he didn't speak. Yi Xian's figure shook, and then he appeared in front of revered you. He looked at revered you and smiled, "Release them." Revered you said, "You're the first to look down on my graveyard of gods." Yi Xian stared at revered you, "Release them." Revered you said, "Why don't you come to my graveyard of gods?" Yi Xian flicked his sleeve. Hiss. The head of one of the experts from the graveyard of gods flew into the air. His soul was obliterated. Yi Xian said, "Release them." Revered Yu stared at Yi Xian, and then he waved his right hand lightly. In an instant, the space to his right split open, and Gu Qing and Li Shiran walked out. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the flying swords that bound the old man and the others instantly vanished. The old man and the others hurriedly retreated behind Revered Yu, and there was fear in their eyes as they looked at Yi Xian. In the sky, Revered Yu stared at Yi Xian. "The members of my graveyard of gods won't die in vain. You kill a single member of my graveyard of gods, and my graveyard of gods will slaughter your entire family." Yi Xian smiled, "I'll be waiting for you." Revered Yu gradually became illusory. The old man and the others behind him hurriedly retreated. At this moment, Li Shiran and Gu Qing walked in front of Yi Xian. Gu Qing was about to say something when Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm the one who implicated you in this matter, not the other way around. I'm the one who should blame myself, not you. I'll take care of it. Just stay in the great spiritual palace." As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of light and vanished into the horizon. A ray of light suddenly descended from the sky at the entrance of the graveyard of gods, and then a man appeared at the entrance. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the white hole, and then he turned around. Meanwhile, the old man and the others that he released had just arrived. He had the green profound sword, so he was naturally faster than them. The old man and the others' expressions changed drastically when they saw Yi Xian. The old man quickly said, "Yi Xian, what are you trying to do?" Yi Xian smiled, "Kill them." The old man said angrily, "Yi Xian, the graveyard of gods has already fulfilled our promise and let them go. How can you do this?" Yi Xian frowned, "Didn't I let them go?" "I let you go." The old man glared at Yi Xian, "Then why did you stop us?" Yi Xian smiled, "Are we enemies?" The old man said, "Of course." As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. "Yi Xian, you," Yi Xian smiled, "since they are enemies, it's not wrong for me to kill them, right?" As he spoke, he opened his palm and a flying sword appeared in it. He glanced at the white hole in the distance. "This place is 100 zhang away from there. Don't say that I, Yi Xian, am heartless. I'll allow you to run 100 zhang first." The old man stared at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, you will die a horrible death." Yi Xian smiled, "Someone once told me the same thing. His name was Tian Yi, and now, the grass on his grave is already 10 zhang tall." Tian Yi. Chapter 1809. Yi Xian flicked his sleeve as soon as he finished speaking. In a split second, the profound azure sword flew out and absorbed the old man's soul. After killing the old man and the others, Yi Xian turned around and looked at the white star hole. Smiling, he said, "God's graveyard." At this time, the space in front of Yi Xian trembled again. Then, Venerable Yu appeared in front of Yi Xian. Still not the main body. Venerable Yu looked at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian smiled, "Want to kill me?" Venerable Yu said, "You think we can't do anything to you?" Yi Xian spread his hands and said with a smile, "Die. Die." Venerable Yu stared at Yi Xian, "No one has ever provoked God's graveyard like this." Yi Xian smiled, "You seem to have forgotten the cause and effect. If I remember correctly, it was your people who wanted to kill me first, right? What? Only your God's graveyard can kill me, but I can't kill your people." Venerable Yu said, "You want to talk about right and wrong with my God's graveyard?" Yi Xian smiled, "Do you know how to talk about right and wrong?" Venerable Yu stared at Yi Xian, "Talk, but it depends on the person. If the one standing before me is a sovereign, of course, my God's graveyard is willing to talk about right and wrong. Pity, you're not." Yi Xian burst out laughing. "It's so real." Venerable Yu said, "Even if you have a sovereign behind you, my God's graveyard will kill you." Yi Xian smiled, "I'm standing right here. Come, I beg to be killed." Venerable Yu stared at Yi Xian for a while, then turned and left. As a shadow, he couldn't do anything to Yi Xian. With Yi Xian's strength, only an ancient God Realm Master could suppress him. It could be said that Yi Xian was the strongest under ancient God Realm. The absolute strongest. After watching Venerable Yu leave, Yi Xian remained silent for a moment, then turned around and left as well. In truth, he also wanted to fight a true ancient God Realm Master. Because right now, ordinary experts were no longer a match for him. Actually, at this moment, he kind of understood why his big brother kept seeking defeat. Defeat was the only option. Only then would he know what he was lacking. His current problem was that he didn't know how strong he was. He didn't have a clear understanding of his own strength. He didn't even know what he was lacking. Therefore, he wanted to fight a true ancient God Realm Master. Of course, he would not charge into the graveyard of the gods. Because if he went inside, the other party wouldn't be fighting him alone, but ganging up on him. Although he was confident, he wasn't so confident that he could take on the entire graveyard of gods by himself. The cemetery of the gods. In front of a tomb, Yuzun stood quietly. Behind him were more than 10 tombs. Outside the tombs were endless mountains. It was desolate. Meanwhile, one of the tombs behind Venerable Yu suddenly trembled, and then an old man gradually walked out from within it. It was Apotheon Mu, who had appeared before. Apotheon Mu looked at the sky. The entire sky was gray and very oppressive. Apotheon Yu said softly, "This person is indeed only in the Heaven Ascension realm, but his strength has far exceeded the Heaven Ascension realm. If he touches that level, I'm afraid even an ancient God Realm Master is no match for him." Apotheon Mu said, "Since he's already an enemy, then get rid of him." Apotheon Yu said, "We can't go out and kill this person. Moreover, this person seems to be acquainted with that Supreme Law Venerable." After a moment of silence, Apotheon Mu said, "I'll go ask the Venerable." After saying that, he turned and left. After a while, Apotheon Mu arrived in front of a palace. This palace was magnificent and extremely luxurious. In the entire palace, there was only one statue. A statue of a woman. It wasn't a statue of the supreme law of the universe. Apotheon Mu bowed slightly to the statue, "Supreme." After a moment, the statue suddenly opened its eyes. "What's the matter?" Apotheon Mu bowed again. "We want to kill someone, but the other party may know the supreme law Venerable." The woman frowned slightly. "It's that woman's people?" Apotheon Mu nodded, "Yes." A cold light flashed in the woman's eyes. "Why give her face? Just kill her. I'll block her side." Hearing this, Apotheon Mu was overjoyed and immediately bowed respectfully. "Understood. It's just that the restrictions of the laws outside." Hearing this, the woman frowned again. "That law was left by that woman. If I break it by force, it's equivalent to declaring war. There's no need for that now. How about this? I'll give you something. This thing can let you stay outside for a while." As her voice fell, a black wooden tablet suddenly appeared in front of the old man. The old man looked at the wooden tablet, which was painted with a small black word, "Imperial." The woman said again, "This thing can let you stay outside for an hour. After an hour, the word will disappear. You must come back, otherwise, that woman will not let you go." The old man bowed slightly. "Understood." After saying that, he turned and left. Inside the hall, the statue of the woman slowly closed her eyes. After walking out of the hall, Apotheon Mu smiled. Originally, he was still a little nervous. After all, there was a supreme martial artist behind Yi Xian. Therefore, he was worried that the supreme martial artist he believed in would be hindered by the supreme martial artist of the supreme laws and would not let the tomb of gods kill Yi Xian. But now it seemed that he was worried too much. Not only did his supreme not stop him, but he was also willing to help. This was simply a pleasant surprise. The smile on Apotheon Mu's mouth gradually widened. "Yi Xian, I hope you can still smile when the time comes." After saying that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. In a certain cloud, above this cloud, there was a small island. The small island in the cloud. Dao Yi sat in front of a wooden table. On the wooden table in front of her, there were several talismans. Dao Yi was focused on studying them. At this moment, a woman suddenly walked to Dao Yi's side. Dao Yi suddenly looked up at the woman, her eyes full of excitement. This is the true law of the universe. The woman smiled and said, "It's amazing, right?" Dao Yi nodded, "It's extremely profound." The woman chuckled, "This is just the foundation. Once you study all of this, you'll realize that great saints and ancient gods are all ants." Dao Yi said in a low voice, "Master, what level has that woman in a plain dress reached?" A woman in a plain dress. The smile on the woman's face gradually vanished, and a moment later, she shook her head and sighed, "I don't know." Dao Yi frowned slightly, "Even Master doesn't know?" The woman nodded, "That's the most terrifying thing. Because I've practically reached the peak of the current universe, and I don't even know it. In other words, she has already jumped out of the current universe." Dao Yi fell silent, and then she asked after a short moment, "Are there many experts at Master's level in the current universe?" The woman said, "Not many. Just a few." Dao Yi hesitated for a moment and said, "The Tomb of Gods also has an expert at Master's level behind it, right?" The woman nodded, "The Tomb of Gods has a deep relationship with that woman." As she spoke, she gazed at Dao Yi, "You're worried about that shameless fellow?" Dao Yi was speechless. The woman shook her head and sighed, "Silly girl. Why are you worried about him?" "Why? To be honest, you should be worried about the Tomb of Gods." Dao Yi hesitated for a moment and said, "I'm afraid that he'll be killed before he can even wait for that woman in a plain dress to return. If he's killed right away, then based on that woman's character." The woman shook her head, "Forget about him. In any case, anyone who goes looking for him will suffer misfortune. The kind that suffers misfortune." Dao Yi was speechless. Within Xiao Ta, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, and there were 480 time-dimensional rivers in front of him. Even though he hadn't attained limitless yet, he'd completely grasped the Tao of space-time. The reason he couldn't attain limitless was because of his soul. If he continued to condense it, his soul wouldn't be able to hold on. Yi Xian suddenly waved his right hand, and with this wave, the time-dimensional rivers in front of him all disappeared without a trace. He had to think of a way to strengthen his soul. His biggest problem now was his divine soul. How could he strengthen his soul? Break through realms. If he broke through realms, his soul could be strengthened. Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly hesitated. If he broke through, then he'd be at the mortal severing realm. And his goal was to achieve heaven ascension realm limitless. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, what you're thinking is wrong." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Xiao Ta, can you tell me how you knew what I was thinking?" Xiao Ta said, "I guessed." Yi Xian said angrily, "Guess your head. Are you a god? You're still guessing, you." Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, why are you talking so much? Do you still want to listen to me?" The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. "Speak." Xiao Ta said, "The reason why Sister Tianming can achieve Heaven Ascension Realm limitless is because she has already surpassed the Heaven Ascension Realm. Not to mention Heaven Ascension Realm limitless, she can achieve limitless in any realm. But you're different. You haven't even surpassed this realm, how can you achieve limitless in this realm?" Yi Xian thought about it, then said, "What you said seems to make a little bit of sense." Xiao Ta continued, "You shouldn't be entangled with this realm and limitless, do what you should do." Yi Xian pondered for a long time, then said, "That makes sense. I didn't think that you, Xiao Ta, still have some use." "Xiao Ta," Yi Xian burst out laughing. He decided not to suppress his level anymore. In fact, he was also a little looking forward to what level he could reach after not suppressing his realm. Space-time? Little saint? He was definitely at the spacetime realm at the very least. Just as Yi Xian was about to break through to the next level, his expression suddenly changed. He left Xiao Ta. As soon as he left Xiao Ta, an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly descended from the sky. Then, a powerful force locked him in place. Yi Xian looked into the distance. There, an old man was slowly walking over. The person who came was none other than Apotheon Mu. Venerable Mu. Ancient God Realm Master. Yi Xian looked at Apotheon Mu and frowned. You can come out? Are you surprised? Apotheon Mu smiled. Are you surprised? Yi Xian glanced behind Apotheon Mu. Are you alone? Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. Is it not enough? Enough? Yi Xian shook his head and laughed. I can fight 100 of you. Apotheon Mu stared at Yi Xian. Young man, there's a limit to your acting. Yi Xian. P.S. Asking for votes. One would be good too. Chapter 18:10. Yi Xian laughed heartily. He spread out his palm, and the sword mausoleum appeared in his hand. In fact, he had long wanted to fight with a real ancient god-level expert. Great saint? Too weak, too weak. Only by fighting with a real ancient god-level expert could he find out his shortcomings. After the sword mausoleum appeared, Yi Xian's figure flashed, and the next moment, a sword light tore through the field. Draw the sword to determine life and death. Moreover, it was the draw the sword to determine life and death with 482 superimposed swords. In the face of a powerhouse of this level, he must go all out and dare not underestimate him. Seeing the power of Yi Xian's sword, Apotheon Mu's brows wrinkled slightly, a trace of surprise flashing in his eyes. The power of this sword was far beyond that of a saint. And the guy in front of him was just at the Heaven Ascension realm. So abnormal. Apotheon Mu didn't think too much. He took a step forward and directly punched out. A very ordinary punch. However, it was this ordinary punch that instantly shattered Yi Xian's sword light. At the same time, Yi Xian retreated tens of thousands of feet away. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the space behind him directly burned and then turned into nothingness. The power of one punch was so terrifying. A trace of blood slowly overflowed from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. In this confrontation, he was completely defeated. However, the corner of Yi Xian's mouth slightly curved up. This was the opponent he wanted. Just then, Apotheon Mu suddenly pointed his fingers toward the sky. Boom! In the sky, a huge black vortex suddenly appeared, and the next moment, a huge fingerprint hundreds of feet long fell straight down from the black vortex. Rumble. At this moment, the entire star field began to burn. Fortunately, this star field was a dead and silent star field. Otherwise, this finger would most likely kill hundreds of millions of living beings. In the distance, Yi Xian's mind moved. In an instant, more than a dozen flying swords directly slashed at the giant finger. However, the giant finger was not affected in the slightest and still fell straight down. In the blink of an eye, the giant finger had arrived above Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian stomped on the ground with his right foot and pulled out his sword. Draw the sword to decide life and death. Yi Xian slashed at the tip of the giant finger. Boom! A wave of sword light shattered, and Yi Xian fell straight down from the sky. When he fell into a mountain range below, the mountain range instantly turned into nothingness. In a huge abyss, Yi Xian held the sword in his right hand and supported himself on the ground. Blood kept flowing from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with boundless battle intent. At this time, Apotheon Mu silently appeared in front of Yi Xian. Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. No wonder they weren't your opponents. You are the first person in history to receive 2 of my moves with the cultivation of Heaven Ascension. Yi Xian smiled and said, again. The moment his voice fell, a flying sword suddenly slashed in front of Apotheon Mu. However, Apotheon Mu did not even move, and Yi Xian's flying sword directly shattered. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of Apotheon Mu and slashed down with his sword again. This sword strike was different from the previous ones. This sword strike contained boundless killing intent. Apotheon Mu pointed with his fingers. Boom! Yi Xian's killing power disappeared in an instant. At the same time, Yi Xian retreated again. However, this time, Apotheon Mu also retreated several feet away. Not only that, but there was a sword mark on his fingertip. Apotheon Mu looked at the sword mark on his fingertip and fell silent. Yi Xian hurt him. In fact, this was basically impossible. Yi Xian was only in the Heaven Ascension realm. What a monster. Apotheon Mu glanced at Yi Xian in the distance. You really are a monster. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have killed the people of my god's cemetery. With that, he took a step forward and was about to attack again, but at this time, a flying sword suddenly slashed in front of him. Apotheon Mu gently blocked with his fingers. Boom! The flying sword went straight. Then shattered. Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. This speed is meaningless to me. Yi Xian grinned, and the next moment, he had already rushed in front of Apotheon Mu. Before he could even draw his sword, Apotheon Mu directly punched out. The speed was even faster. Boom! With this punch, Yi Xian flew tens of thousands of feet away together with his sword, and the space within hundreds of thousands of feet behind him turned pitch black in an instant. An ancient god realm expert. His every word and action was enough to shatter the sky and split the earth. Apotheon Mu was about to attack again, but at this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait a minute." Apotheon Mu narrowed his eyes. What? Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. I can't beat you right now. Apotheon Mu smiled, and then? Yi Xian said, let me improve my strength. Apotheon Mu laughed, give you 10 years? Yi Xian shook his head, half a quarter of an hour is enough. As he spoke, boom! An extremely terrifying aura suddenly swept out from his body. And this aura was getting stronger and stronger. Seeing this scene, Apotheon Mu frowned. What are you doing? As Yi Xian's aura grew stronger, the space around him began to boil. Boom! Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and at this moment, he directly went from the Heaven Ascension realm to Jianghu realm. Jianghu realm. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath, his right hand slowly clenched, and the space around him directly cracked bit by bit. In the distance, Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. Jianghu. Do you think you can compete with me just because you reached Jianghu realm? What a joke. As he spoke, he was about to attack, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared from where he stood, and the next moment, a sword light suddenly slashed straight down from the top of his head. 560 overlapped swords to determine life and death. When this sword was unleashed, the heaven and earth directly exploded. This world simply could not withstand the terrifying power of Yi Xian's sword. Apotheon Mu's eyes flashed with a trace of shock, and without thinking much, he blasted out a punch. It was still a very simple punch. Rumble. A wave of sword light shattered, and Yi Xian was once again sent flying. However, this Apotheon Mu also retreated nearly 1,000 feet. After Apotheon Mu stopped, his right hand slowly clenched, his heart incomparably shocked. This guy was actually so terrifying after reaching the Jianghu realm? Previously, although Yi Xian's sword was also strong, it did not cause any substantial threat to him. But now, Yi Xian's sword actually forced him back 100 feet. The most important thing was that Yi Xian had just reached the Jianghu realm. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and in his hand, the mausoleum of swords trembled slightly. Power. At this moment, he felt that his body possessed endless power. Jianghu realm. Although it was only a realm's difference, Yi Xian discovered that his strength had undergone an earth-shattering change. In the distance, Apotheon Mu suddenly said fiercely, but Jianghu realm, do you think you can overturn the heavens? As his voice fell, he suddenly took a step forward. Rumble. The space where Yi Xian was exploded right away. In a second, Yi Xian felt thousands of forces were tearing his body apart. He was going to be smashed to pieces. Yi Xian was greatly alarmed, and he hurriedly drew his sword and slashed. Swish! A sword light tore down, and a powerful force suddenly erupted in front of him. And at this time, Apotheon Mu suddenly rushed in front of Yi Xian. He was just about to make a move when several sword lights directly slashed at him. Apotheon Mu's eyes narrowed slightly, and he flicked his sleeves. Boom! Several sword lights shattered, and at this moment, Yi Xian had already retreated 1,000 feet away. Yi Xian pointed at Apotheon Mu, slash. Swish 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 swish. 4 sword lights slashed straight at Apotheon Mu from 4 directions, fast as thunder. Apotheon Mu was somewhat disdainful. He flicked his sleeves, and a powerful force surged out from his sleeves. His sleeves vibrated, and in the blink of an eye, the 4 rays of sword light were directly shattered. The speed was very fast, but for a powerhouse of his level, pure speed could not hurt him. In the distance, Yi Xian held the mausoleum of swords and sheathed it. Boom! A powerful sword momentum swept out from his body, and then surged towards Apotheon Mu like a wave. Rumble rumble rumble. Apotheon Mu glanced coldly at Yi Xian, and then he took a step forward. As soon as his step descended, Yi Xian's sword momentum directly collapsed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. With this charge, he instantly arrived above Apotheon Mu's head, and then he drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. Draw the sword to decide life and death that was overlaid with 580 sword lights. As soon as this sword was drawn, the surrounding annihilated space shattered once more. Apotheon Mu was shocked when he sensed the formidable power contained in Yi Xian's sword. He didn't dare be careless, and he clenched his right hand into a fist before suddenly blasting it forward. Head on. Rumble. The sword light shattered, and Yi Xian's entire body was blasted flying while Apotheon Mu retreated hundreds of feet. As soon as he stopped, his entire right arm split apart. This time, he was really injured. Of course, Yi Xian's injuries were even more serious. At this moment, Yi Xian's entire body had split apart. His body was unable to bear the backlash of that power just now. Fortunately, he had the undying bloodline and violet energy. Otherwise, he might have died. Apotheon Mu raised his head and looked at Yi Xian with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. You must die. This Yi Xian was too monstrous. He couldn't be allowed to grow. Apotheon Mu was about to attack again, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." Apotheon Mu's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "I still can't beat you right now." Apotheon Mu sneered, "At least you have some self-awareness." Yi Xian said, "Give me some time." A trace of ridicule appeared on the corners of Apotheon Mu's mouth. "I'll give you 10 years, do you want it?" Yi Xian shook his head. 15 minutes. As he spoke. Boom! A powerful aura suddenly rose from his body, and then Yi Xian's aura grew stronger and stronger. In a short while, a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth suddenly filled the world. Spacetime realm. Yi Xian directly reached the spacetime realm. Seeing this scene, Apotheon Mu was a little dumbfounded. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly said, "It's enough." Again. After saying that, he disappeared from the spot. Chi. A wisp of sword light tore through the field. 650 superimposed sword drawing techniques. In the distance, Apotheon Mu's eyes flashed ferociously. He took a step forward and clasped his hands together. A powerful force suddenly gathered from his body and then converged on his hands. In the next moment, he suddenly rushed forward. Rumble. The sword lights suddenly collapsed, and then the two retreated again and again. Yi Xian retreated tens of thousands of feet, and this time, Apotheon Mu also retreated tens of thousands of feet. After Apotheon Mu stopped, more than a dozen sword lights slashed over, and he waved his right hand. Boom! Boom! The sword lights shattered, but he retreated hundreds of feet again. The power of these flying swords was enough to threaten him. Apotheon Mu looked into the distance. At this moment, Yi Xian was in an even worse state. Blood kept gushing out of his mouth. Although he had reached the spacetime realm, there was still a gap between him and Apotheon Mu. In the distance, Apotheon Mu grinned, "It's just the spacetime realm. Do you think you can overturn the heavens?" After saying that, he was about to attack again, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait. Give me 15 minutes. As his voice faded, boom! Another powerful aura swept out from Yi Xian's body. Apotheon Mu was stunned. "You can play like this?" Chapter 18:11. At this moment, Apotheon Mu was truly dumbfounded. How could Yi Xian break through so easily? How could it be played like this? How could it be played like this? In the distance, Yi Xian's aura skyrocketed, approaching the minor saint realm. Apotheon Mu stared at Yi Xian. This time, there was fear in his eyes. Apotheon Mu was about to make a move when strange blood-red runes appeared in the space around him. Apotheon Mu was horrified. He quickly took out the wooden token, which had become illusory. "It's about to disappear." Apotheon Mu couldn't care about anything else. He turned around and disappeared. The restriction of the universe's law was no joke. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned when he saw Apotheon Mu suddenly leave. Why did he run? Wasn't he going to continue fighting? After a while, Yi Xian gently pressed his hands down. With this, the powerful aura on his body gradually calmed down. He didn't choose to break through to the minor saint realm, because he had broken through 2 realms in a row. His foundation wasn't stable to begin with. If he tried to break through to the minor saint realm, even if he succeeded, his foundation would be unstable, leaving behind many hidden dangers. Therefore, what he needed to do now was to stabilize his realm. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and looked at his body. At this moment, there were countless cracks on his body. In the battle with Apotheon Mu just now, he was completely defeated. Of course, this wasn't a bad thing, because he discovered the gap between himself and an ancient god realm expert. He had to admit that the gap between a great saint and an ancient god realm expert was too great. It was like heaven and earth. After a while, Yi Xian directly returned to Xiao Ta's body. 2 hours later, all the injuries on his body had completely healed. After recovering from his injuries, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword mausoleum appeared in his hand. After pondering for a moment, Yi Xian came to a dead starry sky. He suddenly drew his sword and slashed. A slash with all his strength. This time, he directly superimposed 720 sword drawing techniques. As the sword fell, the entire starry sky collapsed layer by layer. 720 superimposed sword drawing techniques. This was his current limit. No, that was the limit of not using the power of the bloodline. If he used the power of the bloodline, he could become even stronger. However, be it the bloodline power or the green profound sword, he would not use them if he could. He didn't want to own too many things. After a while, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, countless pieces of information flowed into his mind. This was a sword Dao mark that his father had left in his body. As long as he reached the mortal severing realm, this mark of the way of the sword would open up a level, and now, he had broken through 2 levels consecutively. He had to admit that he was very curious about the sword Dao mark that his father and big brother had left behind for him. What could it be? Before long, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. His father had left him a sword technique. Head lift. This was also a sword technique that his father had modified. This was originally a martial technique, but after his father improved it, it became a sword technique. One strike to the head. Yi Xian was ecstatic. Why? Because this headlift sword was similar to his flying sword technique. Of course, this headlift sword was stronger. He was happy because he felt that this headlift could be perfectly combined with his flying sword. Because the core of both was speed. However, this headlift involved more, especially higher requirements for the way of spacetime. Yi Xian decided to cultivate this headlift first. He did not choose to look at the seal on the spacetime mirror. He did not look at his big brother's seal either. Greedy Green City, Yi family, ancestral shrine. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as the heir is removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The speaker was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi family. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the heir. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether to strip him of his position or not. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new heir, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 guards of the Yi family rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, It's not fair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years. Even now, he's fighting for the family. The family is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new heir, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of heir. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. Subordinate Jianghu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Jianghu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply, I'll go through fire and water for the crown prince. I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded, Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Understood. Jianghu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Jianghu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Jianghu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Jianghu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Jianghu felt dizzy, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He charged at Jianghu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Jianghu's chest. Pooh! Jianghu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Jianghu's face. Jianghu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Jianghu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Jianghu and kicked Jianghu's head. Pung! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall, as she asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you butting in for? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Jianghu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on, you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Jianghu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Jianghu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Jianghu seemed to see something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Jianghu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Jianghu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Jianghu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Jianghu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Jianghu's chest. Pooh! Jianghu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke, he stomped down on Jianghu's face. Jianghu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Jianghu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Jianghu, and kicked Jianghu's head. Pung! You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.